Alright, hello, can you hear me? Can you see me? Oh, no, there we are. Right, okay. So, hello again to anyone who's out there. Is anyone out there? Yeah, that's what I thought. Okay, so, hello to anyone who might be seeing this in the future, or anyone who's there that Lamp is somehow unaware of. My name is SkitterSkreetch, you can call me Skitter, and for those of you who aren't familiar, because I don't know how any of this works, I am a rat who, trapped in this accursed library, am forced to read books for reasons that are somewhat unclear to me. Let's go look at the library now. Those of you who are particularly eagle-eyed might notice a small change to my library, other than the increased number of books, which is pretty standard, and that is up here. Oh, you can't really see it over here. Let's run over it. They've got us a clock, so we can now. So we can now look at the time and know what time it is. Something that I wanted for quite a long time. Now I do have to wind this clock, but Lamp assures me that it is accurate, so I am now able to tell what times are. Now Lamp says there's something called time zones, and the time is different for different people and different places, and I don't really know what to do with that information, so I will try and tell you time according to the time I have here, and Lamp has assured me he will help me make the transitions. But yeah, so I should be able to tell you when I'm going to do things now, which should be good, I hope. Anyway, yeah, so my name, like I said, SkitterSkreetch. I read books. For anyone who's new here, or new to watching whatever thing you're watching, today we are going to be reading a number of books, because I went and raided some Jack Londons. We've got a good collection of these now, so we're coming together. Right, so yesterday we read The Body Snatcher by Stevenson and some of Aesop, which I didn't like, and today we have got, and we also did some of these. We did Brown Wolf and All Gold Canyon, both of which I enjoyed. I did manage to get through to House of Pride and Bâtard, which I meant to, but we're going to do that. And then we got 3 new ones: The Spot, The Nightborn, and Moonface, which are so we've got a big collection of London's growing, so I'm looking forward to seeing how it goes. Now I do have a standing theory about Jack London, that all of his books are in some way about transformation, generally from civilized to savage or vice versa, and dogs. I think I might add the search for gold into that, because it seemed to be a recurring theme, but not quite so prominent as those. But yeah, so we got 5 to go through today. I'm hoping that they're not so long that I can't manage it. My throat did give out on me yesterday, but I'm determined to push through the day, so we'll give it a go. And I think we'll start with the ones we didn't get to yesterday. Now, since I have to go through anyway, I'm going to start with Bâtard, since it's furthest in the back, and we'll go from there. Now, unless anyone has any objections or would prefer another thing, which again I don't think there is anyone here, so I don't know who can possibly have such objections, I think I'm just going to start. So, here we are. Look. It's got a funny little thing over the top of it here. Bâtard. Bâtard were a devil. This was recognised throughout the Northland. Elsborn he was called by many men, but his master, Black Leclerc, chose him for the shameful name Bâtard. Now Black Leclerc were also a devil, and the twain were well matched. There is a saying that when 2 devils come together, hell is to pay. This is to be expected, and this is certainly what was to be expected when Bâtard and Black Leclerc came together. The first time they met, Bâtard were a part-grown puppy, lean and hungry with bitter eyes. They met with a snap and a snarl and wicked looks. Leclerc's upper lip had a wolfish way of lifting and showing the white, cruel teeth, It lifted then, and his eyes glinted viciously as he reached for Bâtard and dragged him out from the squirming litter. It was certain they'd divined each other, for on the instant Bâtard had buried his puppy fangs into Leclerc's hand, and Leclerc, thumb and finger, were coolly choking his young life out of him. "Sacre dame," the Frenchman said softly, flirting the quick blood from his bitten hand and glazing down on the little puppy, choking and gasping in the snow. Leclerc turned to John Amlin, storekeeper of the 60-mile post. "That for why I like him. How much say, monsieur? How much? I buy him now. I buy him quick." And because he hated him with exceeding bitter hate, Leclerc bought Bâtard and gave him his shameful name. And for 5 years, the twin adventured across the Northland from St. Michael's in the Yukon Delta, the head reaches of the Pelly, and even so far as the Peace River, Athabasca, and the Great Slave, and they acquired a reputation for uncompromising wickedness, the likes of which never before attached itself to man and dog. Bâtard did not know her father, hence his name, but as John Amlin knew, his father was a great timber wolf. But the mother of Bâtard, as he dimly remembered her, were a snarling, bickering, obscene husky, full-fronted and heavy-chested, with a malign eye, a cat-like grip on life, and a genius for trickery and evil. There were neither faith nor trust in her. Her treachery alone could be relied upon, and her wildwood ailments attested her general depravity. Much of evil and much of strength were there in these, Bâtard's progenitors, and bone and flesh, of their bone and flesh, she had inherited it all. Then came Black Leclerc to lay his heavy hand on the bit of pulsating puppy life, to press and prod and mould him till it became a big bristling beast, acute in prod, in knavery, overspilling with hate, sinister, malignant, diabolical. With a proper master, Bâtard might have made an ordinary, fairly efficient sled dog. He never got the chance. Leclerc but confirmed in him his congenital iniquity. The history of Bâtard and Leclerc is an history of war, the 5 cruel, relentless years, of which their first meeting is fit summary. To begin with, it was Leclerc's fault, for he hated with understanding and intelligence, while the long-legged, ungainly puppy hated only blindly, instinctively, without reason or method. At first, there were no refinements of cruelty, these were to come later, but simple beatings and cruel brutalities. In one of these, Bâtard had near injured. He never regained control of the rib and muscles, and ever after the ear dripped limply down to keep the memory of his tormentor, and he never forgot. His puppyhood were a period of foolish rebellion. He were always worsted, but he fought back because it was in his nature to fight back, and he were unconquerable. Yelping shrilly from the pain, a lash and club, he nonetheless contrived always to throw the defiant smile, the bit of addictive menacing of his soul which fetched without fail more blows and beatings. But his were in mother's tenacious grip to life. Nothing could kill him. He flourished under misfortune, grew fat with famine, and out of his terrible struggle for life developed a preternatural intelligence. His were the stealth and cunning of the husky, his mother, and the fierceness and valour of the wolf, his father. Possibly because of his father that he never wailed. His puppy ups passed with lanky legs, so he became grim and taciturn, quick to strike, slow to warm. He answered curse with snarl and blow with snap, grinning the while his implacable hatred. And there again, under the extremest agony, did Leclerc bring from him the cry of fear nor of pain. His unconquerableness fanned Leclerc's wrath, and stirred him to greater deviltries. Did Leclerc give Bâtard half a fish, and to his mates an old one, Bâtard went forth to rob the other dogs of their fish. Also he robbed caches and expressed himself in 1,000 rogueries, till he became a terror to all dogs and masters of dogs. Did Leclerc beat Bâtard and fondle Babette? Babette was not half the worker he was, while Bâtard threw her down in the snow and broke her iron leg in his heavy jaws, so that Leclerc were forced to shoot her. Likewise, in bloody battles, Bâtard mastered all his teammates, set them the law of trail and forage, and made them live to the law he set. In 5 years he heard but one calm word, received but one soft stroke of hand, and then he did know what manner of thing they were. He leaped like the untamed thing he was, and his jaws were together in a flash. With a missionary at sunrise, a newcomer in the country, he spoke the calm word and gave the soft stroke of the hand. And for 6 months after, he wrote no letters home in the States, and the surgeon at question travelled 200 miles on the ice to save him from blood poisoning. Men and dogs looked askance at Bâtard when he drifted into their camps and posts, and then greeted him with feet threateningly lifted for their kicks. The dogs with bristling manes and bared fangs. Once a man did kick Bâtard, and Bâtard, with quick wolf snap, closed his jaws like a steel trap on the man's calf, and crunched down to the bone, whereat the man was determined to have his life. Only Black Leclerc, with ominous eyes and naked hunting knife, stepped between the killing of Bâtard. Ah, sacre dame, that were a pleasure, Leclerc reserved for himself. Some day it would happen, or else, bah, who was to know? Anyway, the problem would be solved. They had become problems to each other. The very breath each drew was a challenge and menace to the other. Their hate bound them together, as love could never bind. Leclerc were bent on the coming of the day when Bâtard should wilt in spirit and cringe and whimper at his feet. In Bâtard, Leclerc knew what was in Bâtard's mind, and more than once had read it in Bâtard's eyes. And so clearly he had read that when Bâtard were at his back, he made it a point to glance often over his shoulder. Men marvelled when Leclerc refused large money for the dog. "Some day you'll kill him and lay out his price," said John Hamlin once, when Bâtard lay panting in the snow where Leclerc had kicked him, and no one knew whether his ribs was broken, and no one dared look see. "That," said Leclerc dryly, "that is my business, monsieur." And the men marvelled that Bâtard did not run away. They did not understand. Leclerc understood. He was a man who lived much in the open, beyond the sound of human tongue, and he had learned the voices of wind and storm, the sigh of night, the whisper of dawn, and the clash of day. In a dim way he could hear the green things growing, the running of the sap, the burst of the bud, and he knew the subtle speech of things that moved, of the rabbit and the snare, the moody raven beating the air with hollow wings, the bold face shuffling under the moon, the wolf like a grey shadow gliding betwixt twilight and the dark. And the wind Bâtard spoke clear and direct. Full well he understood why Bâtard did not run away, and he looked more often over his shoulder. When in anger, Bâtard was not nice to look upon, and more than once he had leapt for Leclerc's throat, he stretched quivering and senseless in the snow, by the butt of the ever-ready dog whip, and so Bâtard learned to bide his time. When he reached his full strength and prime of youth, he thought the time had come. He was broad-chested, powerfully muscled, far more than ordinary size, his neck from head to shoulder were a mass of bristling hair, to all appearances a full-blooded wolf. Leclerc was lying asleep in his furs when Bâtard deemed the time to be ripe. He crept upon him stealthily, head low to the earth, and low near laid back, with a feline softness of tread. Bâtard breathed gently, very gently, and not till we were close at hand did he raise his head. He paused for a moment, and looked at the bronze bull throat, naked and knotty, and swelling with a deep and steady pulse. The saliva dripped down his fangs and slid off his tongue at the sight, and in that moment he remembered his drooping ear, and uncounted blows and prodigious wrongs. Without a sound, sprang on the sleeping man. Leclerc awoke with a pang of fangs in his throat, and, perfect animal that he was, he awoke clear-headed and with full comprehension. He closed on Bâtard's windpipe with both his hands and rolled out of his furs to get his weight uppermost. But 1,000 of Bâtard's ancestors clung at the throats of unnumbered moose and caribou and dragged them down, and the wisdom of those ancestors were his. When Leclerc's weight came on top of him, he drove his hind legs upwards, and then clawed his down chest and abdomen, ripping and tearing through skin and muscle. And when he felt the man's body wince above him and lift, he worried and shook at the man's throat. His teammates closed around in a snarling circle, and Bâtard, with failing breath and fading sense, knew that their jaws were hungry for him. But that did not matter. It was the man above him, and he ripped and clawed and shook and worried to the last ounce of his strength. But Leclerc choked him with both hands, till Bâtard's chest heaved and writhed, the air denied. His eyes glazed and he set, and his jaws slowly loosened, and his tongue protruded, black and swollen. Bun, you devil, Leclerc gurgled, mouth and throat clogged with his own blood, as he shoved the dizzy dog from him. And then Leclerc cursed the other dogs off as they fell upon Bâtard. They drew back into a wider circle, squatting alertly on their haunches and licking their chops, the hair on every neck bristling erect. Bâtard recovered quickly, and at sound of Leclerc's voice, tottered to his feet and swayed weakly back and forth. "Ah, you big devil," Leclerc spluttered. "I fix you plenty, by God." Bâtard, the air biting into his exhausted lungs like wine, flashed full in the man's face, his jaws missing and coming together with a metallic clip. They rolled over and over on the snow. Leclerc struck him madly with his fist, and they separated face to face and circled back and forth before each other. Leclerc could have drawn his knife. His rifle were at his feet, but the beast in him were up and raging. He would do the thing with his hand, his teeth. Bâtard sprang in, but Leclerc knocked him over with a blow of the fist, fell upon him, and buried his teeth to the bone in the dog's shoulder. It were a primordial setting and a primordial scene, such as might have been in the savage youth of the world. An open space in a dark forest, a ring of grinning wolf dogs, and in the centre 2 beasts, locked in combat, snapping and snarling, ranging about, panting, sobbing, cursing, straining, wild with passion and a fury of murder, ripping and tearing and clawing in elemental brutishness. But Leclerc caught Bâtard behind the ear with a blow from his fist, knocking him over and, for the instant, stunning him. Then Leclerc leaped upon him with his feet and sprang up and down, striving to grind them into the earth. Both Bâtard's hind legs were broken. Ere Leclerc ceased that he might catch breath. Ah, ah, he screamed, incapable of speech, shaking his fist with sheer impotence of throat and larynx. But Bâtard were indomitable. He lay there in an helpless welter, his lips feebly lifting and writhing in a snarl he had not the strength to utter. Leclerc kicked him, and the tired jaw closed on the ankle, but could not break skin. Then Leclerc picked up the whip and proceeded almost to cut him to pieces, and each started with the last crying, "This time I break you, eh? By God, I break you!" In the end, exhausted, fainting from loss of blood, he crumpled up and fell by his victim, and when the wolf dogs closed to take their vengeance, with his last consciousness, dragged his body on top of Bâtard to shield him from their fangs. This occurred not far from sunrise, and was the missionary opening the door to Leclerc a few hours later, was surprised to note the absence of Bâtard from the team. Nor did his surprise lessen when Leclerc threw back the robes from the sled, gathered Bâtard in his arms, and staggered across the threshold. It happened that the surgeon and McQuestion, who was something of a gadabout, were up on a gossip, and between them they proceeded to repair Leclerc. "Merci, non," said he. "Do you fix first the dog? To die, no. It is not good, because him I must yet break. Therefore what he must not die." The surgeon called it a marvel, the missionary a miracle, that Leclerc pulled throughout all. So weak was he that in the spring the fever got him, and he went on his back again. Bâtard had been in even worse plight, but his grip on life prevailed, and the bones in his arms and legs knit. His organs righted themselves during the several weeks he lay strapped to the floor. And by the time Leclerc, finally convalescent, sallow and shaky, took the sun by the cabin door, Bâtard had reasserted supremacy among his kind and brought not only his own teammates but the missionaries' dogs into subjection. He moved never a muscle, nor twitched his hair, when for the first time Leclerc tottered out on the missionary's arm and sank down slowly, with infinite caution, on the three-legged stool. "Bon," he said, "bon, the good son." He stretched out his wasted hands and washed them with the warmth. Then his gaze fell on the dog, and the old light blazed back into his eyes. He touched the missionary lightly on the arm. "Mon père, that one is a big devil, that Bâtard. He will bring me one pistol so that I drink the sun in peace." And henceforth for many days he sat in the sun before the cabin door. He never dozed, and the pistol lay always across his knee. Bâtard had a way, first thing each day, of looking for the weapon in its wonted place. At sight of it he would lift his lips faintly in token that he understood, and Leclerc would lift his own lips in answering grin. One day the missionary took note of the trick. "It is me," he said. "I really believe the brute comprehends." Leclerc laughed softly. "Look you, mon père, that's what I now speak, to that does he listen." As if in confirmation, Bâtard just perceptually wriggled his low ear up to catch the sound. "I say kill," Bâtard growled deep down his throat. The hair bristled along his neck, and every muscle was tense and expectant. I lifted on so that, like that, certain action of the word, he sighted the pistol at Bâtard. Bâtard, with a single leap, sideways, landed around the corner of the cabin out of sight. "Bless me," he repeated at intervals. Leclerc grinned proudly. "But why does he not run away?" The Frenchman's shoulders went up in the racial shrug that means all things from total ignorance to infinite understanding. "And why do you not kill him?" Again the shoulders went up. "Mon père," he said after a pause, "the time is not yet. He is one big devil. Sometime I break him, so, and so the little bits, eh? Sometime. Bon." At 8 came when Leclerc gathered his dogs together and floated down in a bateau of 40 miles, and on the Porcupine, where he took a commission from the PC Company and went exploring for the better part of a year. After that he pulled up the Koyukuk to deserted Arctic City, and later came drifting back from camp to camp along the Yukon. And during the long months, Bâtard was well lessoned. He learned many tortures, and notably the torture of hunger, the torture of thirst, the torture of fire, and worst of all, the torture of music. Like the rest of his kind, he did not enjoy music. It gave him exquisite anguish, whacking him nerve by nerve and ripping apart every fibre of his being. It made him howl long and wolf-like, as when the wolves bay the stars on frosty nights. He could not help howling. It was his own one weakness in the contest with Leclerc, and it was his shame. Leclerc, on the other hand, passionately loved music, as passionately as he loved strong drink. And when his soul clamoured for expression, it usually uttered itself in one of the other two ways, and more usually in both ways. And when he had drunk, his brain alit with unsung song, and the devil in him aroused rampant, his soul found its supreme utterance in torturing Bâtard. "Now we will have a little music," he would say. "Eh, what you think, Bâtard?" We're only an old and battered harmonica, tenderly treasured and patiently repaired, but with the best that money could buy. And out of his silver reeds he drew weird, vagrant airs that men had never heard before. Then Bâtard, dumb throat, with teeth tight clenched, would back away, inch by inch, to the farthest cabin corner. And Leclerc, playing a stout club, Playing, the stamp club tucked under his arm, followed the animal up, inch by inch, step by step, till there were no further retreat. At first, Bâtard would crowd himself in the smallest possible space, grovelling close to the floor. As the music came nearer and nearer, he was forced to uprear his back, jamming at the logs, his forelegs fanning the air as though to beat off the rippling waves of sound. He still kept his teeth together, but severe muscular contractions attacked his body, strange twitching and jerking, until he was all a-quiver and writhing in silent torment. As he lost control, his jaws spasmodically wrenched apart, and deep, throaty vibrations issued forth, too low in the register of sound for human ear to catch. And then, nostrils distended, eyes dilated, hair bristling in nebulous rays, arose a long wolf howl. It came with a slur and rush upwards, swelling with a great heart-breaking burst of sound, and dying away in sadly cadenced wail. Then the next rush upwards, octave on octave, the bursting art, the infinite sorrows and misery, fainting, fading, falling and dying slowly away. It was fit for hell, and Leclerc, with a fiendish ken, seemed to divine each particular nerve and heartstring, with long wails and trembling and sobbing minors to make it yield up its last shred of grief. It were frightful. For 24 hours after, Bâtard were nervous and unstrung, staring at common sounds, tripping over his own shadow, but withal vicious and masterful with his teammates. Nor did he show signs of breaking spirit. Rather did he grow more grim and taciturn, biding his time with an inscrutable patience that began to puzzle and weigh upon Leclerc. The dog would lie on the firelight, motionless for hours, gazing straight before him at Leclerc, and hating him with his bitter eyes. Often the man felt that he had bucked against the very essence of life, the unconquerable essence that swept the orc down out of the sky like a feathered thunderbolt, that drove the great grey goose across the zones, hurled the spawning salmon through 2,000 miles of Bull and Yukon flood. At such times he felt impelled to express his own unconquerable essence, and with strong drink, wild music and Bâtard he indulged in vast orgies, when he pitted his puny strength in the face of things and challenged all that was, and had been, and was yet to be. There is something there, he affirmed, when the rhythmed vagaries of his mind touched the secret chords of Bâtard's being and brought forth the long, lugubrious hour. I pull it out with with both my hands, so. It is fun, it is very fun. The priest chant, the woman's prayer, the man swear, the little birds go pip pip, Bâtard. Him go ya, and it is all the very same thing. Father Gautier, a worthy priest, once reproved him with instances of concrete perdition. He never reproved him again. It may be so, mon père, he made to answer, and I think I'll go through hell at snapping like the hemlocks through the fire, mon père? All bad things come to an end as well as good, and so with Black Leclerc. On a summer low water in a pooling boat, he left MacDougall for Sunrise. He left MacDougall in company with Timothy Brown, and arrived at Sunrise by himself. Further, it was known they had quarrelled just previous to pulling out. The Lizzie, a wheezy stun-ton stern-wheeler, 24 hours behind, beat Leclerc in by 3 days. And when he did get in, it were a clean drilled bullet hole through his shoulder muscle and a tale of ambush and murder. A strike had been made at Sunrise, and things had changed considerably. With the infusion of several hundred gold seekers, a deal of whiskey and half a dozen equipped gamblers, the missionary had seen the page of his years of labour with the engines wiped clean. When the squaws became preoccupied with cooking beans and keeping the fire going for the wifeless miners, and the bucks were swapping their warm furs for black bottles and broken tarn pieces, he took to his bed and said "bless me" several times, and departed to his fine accountant in a rough-hewn odd-lawn box. Whereupon the gamblers moved their roulette and faro tables into the mission house, and the click of chips and clink of glasses went up from dawn to dark to dawn again. Now Timothy Brown was well beloved among these adventurers of the North. The one thing against him was his quick temper and ready fist, a little thing for which his kind heart and forgiving hand more than atoned. On the other hand, there were nothing to atone for Black Leclerc. He was black as more than one remembered deed bore witness, while he was as well hated as the other was beloved. So the man of Sunrise put an antiseptic dressing on his shoulder and hailed him before Judge Lynch. It were a simple affair. He had quarrelled with Timothy Brown at MacDougall. With Timothy Brown he had left MacDougall. Without Timothy Brown he had arrived at Sunrise. Considering the light of his evilness, the unanimous conclusion was that he had killed Timothy Brown. On the other hand, Leclerc acknowledged their facts, but challenged their conclusion and gave his own explanation. 20 miles out of Sunrise, he and Timothy Brown were pulling the boat along the rocky shore. From that shore, 2 rifle shots rang out. Timothy Brown pitched out of the boat and went down bubbling red, and that was the last of Timothy Brown. He, Leclerc, pitched in the bottom of the boat with a stinging shoulder. He lay very quiet, peeping at the shore. After a time, 2 Indians stuck up their heads and came out of the water's edge, carrying between them a birch bark canoe. As they launched it, Leclerc let fire. He potted one who went over the side after the manner of Timothy Brown. The other dropped into the bottom of the canoe. The canoe and poling bolt went down the stream in a drifting battle. After they hung up on a split current and the canoe passed on one side of an island, the poling bolt the other. That was the last of the canoe units, and he had come into the sunrise. Yes, from the way the engine and the canoe jumped, he was sure he had potted him. That was all. This explanation was not deemed adequate. They gave him 10 hours grace while the Lizzie steamed down to investigate. 10 hours later, she came wheezing back to Sunrise. There had been nothing to investigate. No evidence had been found to back up his statements. They told him to make his will, for he possessed a $50,000 Sunrise claim, and they were a law-abiding as well as law-giving breed. Leclerc shrugged his shoulders. But one thing, he said, a little, what you call favor, a little favor, that is it. I give my $50,000 to the church. I give my husky dog Bâtard to the devil. A little favor? First you hang him, and then you hang me. It is good, eh? But it was, they agreed. The Hellspawn should break trail for his master across the last divide. The court were adjourned down to the river bank, where a big spruce tree stood by itself. Slackwater Charlie put an hangman's knot in the end of a hauling line, and the noose was slipped over little Leclerc's head and pulled tight around his neck. His hands were tied behind his back, and he was assisted to the top of a cracker box. Then the running end of the line was passed over an overhanging branch, drawn taut and made fast. To kick the box out from under would leave him dancing on the air. Now for the dog, said Webster Shaw, sometimes a mining engineer. You'll have to rope him, Slackwater. Leclerc grinned. Slackwater took a chew of tobacco, rove a running noose, and proceeded to leisurely crawl out a few turns in his hands. He paused once or twice to brush particularly offensive mosquitoes from off his face. Everybody was brushing mosquitoes, except Leclerc, about whose head a small cloud was visible. Even Bâtard lay full stretched on the ground, with his forepaws rubbed the pest away from his eyes and mouth. While Slackwater waited for Bâtard to lift his head, a faint call came down the quiet air, and a man was seen waving his arms and running across the flat from Sunrise. It was the storekeeper. Call her off, boys, he panted as he came among them. Little Sandy and Bernard had just got in, he explained, with returning breath. Landed down below and came up by the shortcut. Got the beaver with him, picked him up in his canoe, stuck in a back channel with a couple of bullet holes in him. Other buck was Clots, the ones that knocked spots out of his squats and dusted. Eh? What I say? Hey! Leclerc cried exultantly. That they want for sure. I know, I speak true. Anything to do with is teach these damn Siwashers a little manners, spoke Webster Shaw. They ain't fat and sassy, we'll have to bring them up down a peg. Round in all the bucks and string up the beavers for an object lesson, that's the programme. Come on and let's see what he's got to say for himself. Eh, monsieur, Leclerc called, and the crowd began to melt away through the twilight direction of Sunrise. I like very much to see the fun. I will turn you loose when we come back, Webster Shaw said her over his shoulder. In the meantime, meditate upon your sins and the way of providence. It will do you good, so be grateful. As is the way with men who are accustomed to great hazards, whose nerves are healthy and trained to patience, so it was with Leclerc, who set himself to the long wait, which is to say that he reconciled to mind it. There were no setting of the body, the taut rope fixed in the stand rigidly erect. The least relaxation of the leg muscles pressed a rough fibrin noose into his neck, while the upright position caused him much pain in his wounded shoulder. He projected his underlip and expelled his breath upward along his face to blow the mosquitoes away from his eyes. But the situation had its compensation. To be snatched from the moor of death was well worth a little bodily suffering, and it were unfortunate that he should miss the hanging of the beaver. And so he mused till his eyes chanced to fall upon Bâtard, head between forepaws and stretched on the ground asleep. And then Leclerc ceased to muse. He studied the animal closely, striving to sense if the sleep were real or feigned. Bâtard's sighs were even regularly, but Leclerc felt the breath came and went a shade too quickly. Also he felt there were a vengeance or alertness to every air that belied the unshackling sleep. He would have given his Sunrise claim to be assured the dog were not a rape, and when one of his joints cracked, he looked quickly and guiltily at Bâtard to see if he roused. He did not rouse then, but a few minutes later he got up and slowly, lazily stretched and looked carefully about him. Sacré dame, said Leclerc under his breath. Assured that no one were in sight or hearing, Bâtard sat down, curled his upper lip almost into a smile, looked up at Leclerc and flicked his chops. I see my finish, the man said and laughed sardonically aloud. Bâtard came nearer, useless ear wobbling, the good ear cocked forward with a devilish comprehension. He thrust his head on one side quizzically and advanced with a mincing, playful step. He rubbed his body gently against the box till it shook and shook again. Leclerc teetered, careful to maintain his equilibrium. Bâtard, he said loud, calmly. Look out, I kill you. Bâtard snarled at the world and shook the box with greater force. Then he upreared, with his forepaws threw his weight against it higher up. Leclerc kicked out with one foot, but the rope bit into his neck and checked so abruptly as to nearly overbalance him. "Aya, Chuk, Machon!" he screamed. Bâtard retreated 20 feet or so, with a fiendish levity in his bearing that Leclerc could not mistake. He remembered the dog often breaking the scum of ice on the water hole by lifting up and throwing his weight upon it, and remembering he understood what he now had in mind. Bâtard faced about and paused. He showed his white teeth in a grin, which Leclerc answered, and held his body through the air in a full charge, straight at the box. 15 minutes later, Slackwater Charlie and Webster Shaw, returning, caught glimpse of a ghostly pendulum swinging back and forth in the dim light. As they hurriedly drew in close, they made out the man's inert body, and a large thing that clung to it and shook and worried, gave to it the swaying motion. "Aya, Chuck, you spawn of hell!" yelled Webster Shaw, but Bâtard glared at him and snarled threateningly without loosening his jaws. Slackwater Charlie got out his revolver, but his arm was shaking, as with a chill, and he fumbled. "Here, you take it," he said, and passed the weapon over. Webster Shaw laughed shortly, drew a sight between the gleaming eyes, and pressed the trigger. Bâtard's body twitched with a shock, pressed the ground spasmodically for a moment, and went suddenly limp, with his teeth still held fast locked. And that's the end of Bâtard. Quite an unpleasant story. Still, I suppose it's probably for the best. Man like, what's his name, Leclerc, deserved what he got, and Bâtard were not a kind animal. Well, I don't suppose he did turn anything too wicked. I mean, he tried to kill Leclerc, but that seems very fair enough to me. He bit a man who kicked him, but I can't fault him that. He thrashed the other dogs, but that's the same as literally every other dog that is the main character in the story of London, so... All told, actually, Bâtard, fair play to him. One of the better dogs, overall. Never killed a man who didn't deserve it. Which, I mean, even Buck from Call of the Wild, he killed quite a lot of fellas who took his... Was it John Chapman? God. John Thornton, that's it. Killed a lot of those people who did John Thornton. Which, I mean, I suppose you can't say that they were blameless, but he killed more guilty men than Bâtard. Bâtard only killed the one. Whitefen killed a lot of people. And dogs. Aside from Brown, who was also called Wolf in that one story, this is probably the kindest and best behaved dog we've seen. Huh. Isn't that funny? I don't think he's meant to be. I don't think you are supposed to be sympathetic to Bâtard, but by the standards of London, yeah, he's practically an angel. Oof. Ain't that a strange thing? Yeah, I mean, I suppose you call this a morality tale. I mean, both of them is as bad as one another. And Leclerc's cruelty got him killed. I suppose in turn, Bâtard's hatred got him killed because he couldn't let go of the thing and run off. But, I mean, I think it's pretty clear that Leclerc's the villain of the piece. You torture a thing, you make it until it is nothing but hatred for you. And then it hates you and kills you. That sort of is what you get. I think it's particularly rough, the use of music. Now, I ain't exactly experienced with music, being that I was a rat of normal intellect until pretty recently, but I've come to appreciate it. There's been some singing going on down here. I think it's a nice thing, and to see it used as a cruelty is, well, it strikes me very wrong indeed. Taking something that is beautiful and nice and then using it as an implement of hatred. I think you'd have to be a very wicked sort of person to do that. I'll tell you that. A very wicked sort of person indeed. But I don't have much more to say, so let's have a quick drink of water. Today's water is pleasantly cool. No real extra stuff to it, so that's nice. And we'll move on to our surprise, I suppose. No, I'm not sure what this is going to be. I'm suspecting some sort of, what do you call it? God-style allegory, like a Bible thing. London does a bit of that, and I think pride's one of those words that's associated with the devil. I don't know how I know that. That is, That's an association that my head is making. We'll see. So our themes we're looking for are still transformation and dogs. We had both in the last one. A dog that would transform into a devil. Right, no sign of gold. There's a mark against it, but we'll see how we get on. There weren't any dogs in the last story we read on Gold Canyon, so we'll see. The House of Pride. Percival Ford wondered why he had come. He did not dance. He did not care much for army people. He knew them all, gliding and revolving there on the broad lanai of the seaside, the officer in their fresh starched uniforms of white, the civilians in white and black, and the women bare shoulder and arm. After 2 years in Honolulu, the 20th would depart him to its new station in Alaska. And Percival Ford, as one of the big men of the islands, could not help knowing the officers and now women. But between him knowing and liking were a vast gulf. The army women frightened him just a little. They were in ways quite different from the women he liked best, the elderly women, the spinsters and the bespectacled maidens, and the very serious women of all ages who he met on church and library and kindergarten committees. He came meekly to him for contributions and advice. He ruled those women by virtue of his superior mentality, his great wealth, and the high place he occupied in the commercial baronage of Hawaii. And they were not afraid of them in the least. Sex with them were not obtrusive. Yeah, that was it. There was in them something else, or more, an assertive grossness of life. He was fastidious, he acknowledged that to himself, and these army women, with their bare shoulders and naked arms, their straight-looking eyes, and their vitality and challenging femaleness, jarred upon his sensibilities. Nor did he get on better with the army men, who took life lightly, drinking and smoking and swearing their way through life, and asserting the essential grossness of flesh, no less shamelessly than their women. He were always uncomfortable in the company of the army men. They seemed uncomfortable too, and he felt always that they were laughing at him, up their sleeves, or pitying him, or tolerating him. Then too, they seemed, by mere contiguity, to emphasise a lack of it in him, to call attention to that in them which he did not possess, and which he thanked God he did not possess. For they were like their women. In fact, Percival Ford was no more a woman's man than he was a man's man. A glance at him told the reason. He had good constitution, never was on intimate terms with sickness, not even mild disorders, but he lacked vitality. He was a negative organism. No blood with a ferment in it could have nourished and shaped that long and narrow face, those thin lips, lean cheeks, and small sharp eyes. A thatch of hair, dust-coloured, straight and sparse, advertised the niggard soil, as did the nose, thin, delicately moulded, and just hinting at the suggestion of a beak. His meagre blood had denied him much of life, and permitted him to be an extremist in one thing only, which was righteousness. Over right conduct he pondered and agonised, and that he should do right was as necessary to his nature as loving and being loved were necessary to a commoner clay. He was sitting under the algaroba trees between the lanai and the beach. His eyes wandered over the dancers, and he turned his head away and gazed seaward across the mellow-sounding surf, the Southern Cross burning low on the horizon. You were irritated by the bare shoulders and arms of the women. If he had a daughter, he would never permit it, never. But his hypothesis was the sheerest abstraction. The thought process had been accompanied by no inner vision of that daughter. He did not see a daughter with arms and shoulders. Instead, he smiled at the remote contingency of marriage. He was 35, and having had no personal experience of love, he looked upon it not as mythical, but as bestial. Anybody could marry. Japanese and Chinese coolies, toiling on the sugar plantations and in the rice field, married. They invariably married at the first opportunity. It was because they were so low in the scale of life. There was nothing else for them to do. They were like the army men and women. But for him there were other higher things. You were different from them. From all of them. You were proud of how he happened to be. He had come a no petty love match. He had come a lofty conception of duty and of devotion to cause. His father had not married for love. Love were a madness that had never perturbed Isaac Ford. When the answer called to go to the Eden with a message of life, it had no thought and no desire for marriage. In this they were alike, his father and he, but the border missions were as economical. With New England thrift, it weighed and measured and decided that married missionaries were less expensive per capita and more efficacious. So the board commanded Isaac Ford to marry. Furthermore, it furnished him with a wife, another zealous soul with no thought of marriage, intent only on doing the Lord's work among the heathen. They saw each other for the first time in Boston. The board brought them together, arranged everything, and by the end of the week they were married, and started on the long voyage around the Horn. Percival Ford was proud that he had come of such a union. He had been born high, and thought of himself as a spiritual aristocrat. He was proud of his father, were a passion within him. The erect, austere figure of Isaac Ford had burned itself upon his pride. On his desk were a miniature of that soldier of the Lord. In his bedroom hung a portrait of Isaac Ford, painted at the time when he had served under the monarchy as Prime Minister. Not that Isaac Ford had coveted place and worldly wealth, but that, as Prime Minister, and later as banker, he had been a great service to the missionary cause. The German crowd, and the English crowd, and all the rest of the trading crowd had sneered at Isaac Ford as a commercial soul-saver. But he, his son, knew different. When the natives, emerging abruptly from their feudal system with no conception of the nature and significance of property and land, were letting their broad acres slip through their fingers, it was Isaac Ford who had stepped in between the trading crowd and its prey, and taken possession of fat, vast holdings. Small wonder the trading crowd did not like his memory. He had never looked upon this enormous wealth as his own. He had considered himself God's steward. Out of the revenues he had built schools and hospitals and churches. Nor was it his fault that Sugar, after the slump, had paid 40% that the bank he founded had prospered into a railroad, and that, among other things, 50,000 acres of Wahoo pasture land, which he had bought for $1 an acre, grew 8 tons of sugar to the acre every 18 months. Now, in all truth, Isaac Ford were a heroic figure, fit, though Percival thought privately, to stand beside the statue of Kamehameha the First in front of the Judiciary Building. Isaac Ford were gone, but he, his son, carried on the good work, at least inflexibly, if not masterfully. At least as inflexibly, if not as masterfully. He turned his eyes back to the lanai. What was the difference, he asked himself, between the shameless, grass-girdled hula dancers and the décolleté dances of women of his own race? Was there an essential difference, or was it a matter of degree? As he pondered the problem, an hand rested on his shoulder. "Hello, Ford, what are you doing here? Isn't this a bit festive?" I tried to be lenient, Dr. Kennedy, even as I look on. Percival Ford answered gravely. "Won't you sit down?" Dr. Kennedy sat down, clapping his palms sharply. A white-clad Japanese servant answered swiftly. Scotch and soda was Kennedy's order, and turning the other said, "Of course, I don't ask you, but I will take something," Ford said firmly. The doctor's eyes showed surprise, and the servant waited. "Boy, a lemonade, please." The doctor laughed at it heartily, as a joke on himself, and glanced at the musicians under the owl tree. "Why, it's the Alola Orchestra," he said. "I thought they were with the Hawaiian Hotel on Tuesday nights. Some rumpus, I guess." His eyes paused for a moment and dwelt upon the one who was playing guitar and singing a Hawaiian song to the accompaniment of all the instruments. His face became grave as he looked at the singer, and it was still grave as he turned it to his companion. "Look here, Ford, isn't it time you let up on Joe Garland? I understand you were in opposition to the promotion committee sending him to the States on the surfboard proposition. I have been wanting to speak to you about it. I should have thought you'd be glad to get him out of the country. It would be a good way to end your persecution of him." "Persecution?" Percival Ford's eyebrows lifted into a regular. "Call it by any name you please," Kennedy went on. "You've hounded that poor devil for years. It's not his fault, even you will admit that." "Not his fault." Percival Ford's thin lips grew tightly together for the moment. "Joe Garland is dissolute and idle. He has always been a wastrel, a profligate. But that's no reason you should keep on after him the way you do. I watched you from the beginning. The first thing you did when you returned from college and I found him working the plantation as outside Luna was to fire him. You with your millions and he with his $60 a month." "Not the first thing," Percival Ford said judiciously, in the tone he was accustomed to, using in committee meetings. "I gave him his warning. The superintendent said he was a capable handler. I had no objection to him on that ground. It was what he did outside working hours. He undid my work faster than I could build up. Of what use were the Sunday schools, the night schools, and the sewing classes when in the evenings there was Joe Garland with his infernal and eternal tum-tumming of guitar and ukulele, his strong drink and his hula dancing? After I warned him, I came upon him, I shall never forget it, came upon him down at the cabins. It was evening. I could hear the hula songs before I saw the scene. And when I did see it, there were the girls, shameless in the moonlight and dancing, girls upon whom I had worked to teach clean living and right conduct. And there were 3 girls there, I remember, just graduated from the mission school. Of course I discharged Joe Garland. I knew it was the same as at Hilo. People said I went out of my way when I persuaded Mason and Finch to discharge him. It was the missionaries who requested me to do so. He was undoing their work by his reprehensible example. Afterwards, when he got on the railroad, your railroad, he was discharged without cause," Kennedy challenged. "Not so," was the quick answer. "I had him out into my private office and talked with him for half an hour. You discharged him for inefficiently? For immoral living, if you please." Dr. Kennedy laughed with a grating sound. "Who the devil gave it to you to be judge and jury? Does landlordism give you control of the immortal souls of those that toil for you? I've been your physician. Am I to expect tomorrow you case that I give up Scotch and soda or your patronage? Bah, Ford, you take life too seriously. Besides, when Joe got in that muggling scrape, he wasn't in your employ either, and he sent word to you, asked you to pay his fine, you left him to do 6 months hard labour on the reef. Don't forget, you left Joe Garland in the lurch that time. You threw him down hard, and yet I remember the first day you came to school. We boarded, you were only a day schooler, and you had to be initiated. 3 times under the swimming tank. You remember? It was the regular dose every new boy got. And you held back. You denied that you could swim. You were frightened, hysterical. Yes, I know, Percival Ford said slowly. I was frightened, and it were a lie, for I could swim, and I was frightened. And you remember who fought for you? Who lied for you harder than you could lie and swore he knew you couldn't swim? Who jumped into the tank and pulled you out after the first under and was nearly drowned for it by the other boys who had discovered by that time that you could swim? Of course I know, the other replied calmly. And a generous act as a boy does not excuse a lifetime of wrongdoing. He has never done wrong to you. Personally and directly, I mean. No, was Percival Ford's answer. That is what makes my position impregnable. I have no personal spite against him. He is bad, that is all. His life is bad. Which is another way of saying that he does not agree with you, the way life should be lived, the doctor interrupted. Have it that way. It is material. He's an idler. Read the reason, was the interruption, considering the jobs out of which he has knocked him. He is immoral. Oh, hold on now, Ford. Don't go harping on that. You are a pure New England stock. Joe Garland is half Kanaka. Your blood is thin, his is warm. Life is one thing to you and another to him. He laughs and sings and dances through life, genial, unselfish, childlike, everybody's friend. You go through life like a perambling prayer wheel, a friend of nobody but the righteous, and the righteous are those who agree with you as to what is right. And after all, who shall say? You live like an anchorite. Joe Garland lives like a good fellow, who has extracted more from life. We are paid to live, you know. When the wages are too meagre, we throw up the job, which is the cause, believe me, of all rational suicide. Joe Garland would surely starve to death on the wages you get from life. You see, he is made differently. So would you starve on his wages, which are singing and love, lust, if you'll pardon me, was the interruption. Dr. Kennedy smiled. Love to you is a word of 4 letters and a definition which you have extracted from a dictionary. But love, real love, dewy and palpitant and tender, you do not know. If God made you and me and men and women, believe me, he made love too. To come back, it's about time you quit hounding Joe Garland. It is not worthy of you, and it is cowardly. The thing for you to do is to reach out and lend him a hand. Why I any more than you? The other demanded. Why don't you reach him a hand? I have. I'm reaching him a hand now. I'm trying to get you not to down the promotion committee's proposition of sending him away. I got him the job at Hyler with Mason and Fitch. I got him half a dozen jobs out of every one with which you drove him. But never mind that. Don't forget one thing. And a little frankness won't hurt you. It is not fair play to settle another's fault on Joe Garland. And you know that you, least of all, are the man to do it. Why, man, it's not good taste. It's positively indecent. Now I don't follow you, Percival Ford answered. You're up in the air with some obscure scientific theory of heredity and personal irresponsibility. But how any theory can hold Joe Garland irresponsible for his wrongdoings, and at the same time hold me personally responsible for them, more responsible than anyone else, including Joe Garland, is beyond me. It's a matter of delicacy, I suppose, or of taste, if that prevents you from following me. Dr. Kennedy snapped out. It's all very well for the sake of society, tacitly, to ignore some things, but you do more than tacitly ignore. What is it, pray tell, that I tacitly ignore? Dr. Kennedy were angry. A deeper red than that of constitutional Scotch and Shoulders suffused his face. He answered, Your father's son. Now just what do you mean? Damn it, man, you can't ask me to be plainer spoken than that. But if you will, all right. Isaac Ford's son, Joe Garland, your brother. Percival Ford sat quietly, an annoyed and shocked expression on his face. Kennedy looked at him curiously. Then, as the slow minutes dragged by, he became embarrassed and frightened. My God, he cried finally. You don't mean to tell you that you didn't know? As an answer, Percival Ford's cheeks turned slowly grey. It's a ghastly joke, he said. A ghastly joke. The doctor had got himself in hand. Everybody knows it, he said. I thought you knew it. And since you don't know it, it's time you did, and I'm glad of the chance of setting you straight. Joe Garland and you were brothers, half-brothers. It's a lie, Ford cried. You don't mean it. Joe Garland's mother was a Canelo. Dr. Kennedy nodded. I remember her well with her duck pond and taro patch. His father was Joseph Garland, the beachcomber. Dr. Kennedy shook his head. He died only 2-3 years ago. He used to get drunk. That's where Joe got his disillusionment from. That's the heredity for you. And nobody told you, Kennedy said wonderingly after a pause. Dr. Kennedy, you have said something terrible which I cannot allow to pass. You must either prove or prove it yourself. Turn around and look at him. You've got him in profile. Look at his nose. That's Isaac Ford's. Yours is a thin edition of it. That's right, look. The lines are fuller, but they are all there. Percival Ford looked at the Kanaka half-breed who played under the howe tree, and it seemed as by some illumination he was gazing on a wraith of himself. Feature after feature flashed in an unmistakable resemblance. Or rather, were he who were arrayed for that other full-meshed and generously moulded man. His features and that other man's features were all reminiscent of Isaac Ford, and nobody had told them. Every line of Isaac Ford's face he knew. Miniatures, portraits, and photographs of his father were passing in review through his mind, and here and there, over again, in the face before him, he caught resemblances and vague hints of likeness. It was devil's work that could reproduce the austere features of Isaac Ford and the loose and sensuous features before him. Once the man turned, and for one flashing instant it seemed to Percival Ford that he saw his father, dead and gone, peering at him out the face of Joe Garland. "It's nothing at all," he could faintly hear Dr. Kennedy saying. "And we're all mixed up in the old days, you know that. You've seen it all your life. Sailors married queens and begat princesses, and all the rest of it. It was the usual thing in the islands." "Not with my father," Percival Ford interrupted. "There you are," Kennedy shrugged shoulders. "Cosmic sap and smoke of life. Old Isaac Ford was straight-laced and all the rest, but I know there's no explaining it, least of all to himself, and he understood it no more than you do. Smoke of life, that's all. And don't forget one thing, Ford. There was a dab of unruly blood in old Isaac Ford, and Joe Garland inherited it. All of it, smoke of life and cosmic sap, while you inherited all of old Isaac's ascetic blood. Just because your blood is cold, well-ordered, and well-disciplined, there's no reason that you should frown upon Joe Garland. When Joe Garland undoes the work you do, remember that it's only old Isaac Ford on both sides, undoing with one hand what he does with the other. You were Isaac Ford's right hand, let us say. Joe Garland is his left hand." Percival Ford made no answer, and in the silence Dr. Kennedy finished his forgotten scotch and soda. From across the ground, an automobile hooted imperatively. "There's the machine," Dr. Kennedy said, rising. "I've got to run. I'm sorry I've shaken you up. At the same time, I'm glad. And know one thing, Isaac Ford's a dab of unruly blood was remarkably small, and Joe Garland got it all. And one other thing, if your father's left hand offends you, don't smite it off. Besides, Joe is all right. Frankly, if I could choose between you and him to live with me on a desert isle, I'd choose Joe." Little bare-legged children ran about him, playing on the grass, but Percival Ford did not see them. He was gazing steadily at the singer under the owl tree. He even changed his position once to get closer. The clerk at the seaside went by, limping with age and dragging his reluctant feet. He had lived 40 years in the islands. Percival Ford beckoned to him. The clerk came respectfully, wondering that he should be noticed by Percival Ford. "John," Ford said, "I want you to give me some information. Won't you sit down?" The clerk sat down awkwardly, stunned by the unexpected honour. He blinked at the other and mumbled, "Yes, sir, thank you." "John, who is Joe Garland?" The clerk stared at him, blinked and cleared his throat, and said nothing. "Go on," Percival Ford commanded. "Who is he?" "You're joking me, sir," the other managed to articulate. "I spoke to you seriously?" The clerk recoiled from him. "You don't mean to say you don't know?" he questioned, his question in itself the answer. "I want to know. Why he's—" John broke off and looked about him helplessly. "And you better ask somebody else. Everybody thought you knew. We always thought." "Yes, go ahead." "We always thought that was why you had it in for him." Photographs and miniatures of Isaac Ford were trooping through his son's brain. The ghosts of Isaac Ford seemed in the air about him. "I wish you a good night, sir," he could hear the clerk saying. He saw him beginning to limp away. "John," he called abruptly. John came back and stood near him, blinking and nervously moistening his lips. "You haven't told me yet, you know." "Ah, about Joe Garland?" "Yes, about Joe Garland. Who is he?" "He's your brother, sir. If I say it, who shouldn't." "Thank you, John. Good night." "He didn't know," the old man queried, content to linger now that the crucial point was past. "Thank you, John. Good night," was the response. Out of a clear sky, filled only with stars and moonlight, fell a rain so fine and attenuated as to resemble a vapour spray. Nobody minded it. The children played on, running bare-legged over the grass and leaping into the sand, and in a few minutes it was gone. In the southeast, Diamondhead, a black bolt sharply defined, silhouetted its crater form against the stars. At sleepy intervals, the surf flung its foam across the sand to the grass. Far out could be seen the black specks of swimmers under the moon. The voices of the singers, singing a waltz, died away, and in the silence, from somewhere under the trees, arose the laugh of a woman. It was a love cry. It startled Percival Ford, and it reminded him of Dr. Kennedy's phrase. Down by the outrigger canoes, where they lay balled out on the sand, he saw men and women, Kanakas, reclining languorously like lotus eaters. Women in white holocuns dogs, and against one such holoku he saw the dark head of the steersman of the canoe resting upon the woman's shoulder. Farther down, where the strip of sand widened at the entrance to the lagoon, he saw a man and woman walking side by side. As they drew near the lanai, he saw the woman's hand go down to her waist, disengage a girding arm. As they passed him, Percival Ford nodded to the captain he knew, and to a major's daughter. Smoke of life, that was it. An ample phrase. And again, from under the darker algaroba tree arose the laugh of a woman. It was a love cry, and past his chair on the way to bed, a bare-legged youngster was led by a chidden Japanese nurseman. The voices of the singers broke softly and meltingly into a Hawaiian love song, and officers and women with circling arms were gliding and whirling on the lawn, on the lanai. And once again the woman laughed under the algaroba tree. Percival Ford knew only disapproval of it all. He was irritated by the love laugh of the woman, by the steersman with billowed head and the white holoku, by the couples that had walked on the beach, by the officers and women that danced, and by the voices of the singers singing alone, and his brother singing there with them under the howell tree. The women that laughed especially irritated him. A curious train of thought were aroused. He were Isaac Ford's son, and whilst what had happened with Isaac Ford might happen with him, he felt in his cheeks the flaking of a blush at the thought, and experienced a poignant sense of shame. He were appalled by what was in his blood. It were like learning suddenly that his father had been a leper, and his own blood might bear the taint of that dreaded disease. Isaac Ford, the austere soldier of the Lord, the old hypocrite. What difference between him and any beachcomber? The house of pride that Percival Ford had built was tumbling about his heels. The hours passed, the army people laughed and danced, the native orchestra played on. Percival Ford wrestled with the abrupt and overwhelming problem that had been thrust upon him. He prayed quietly, his elbow on the table, his head bowed upon his hand, with all the appearance of any tired onlooker. Between the dances, the army men and women and the civilians fluttered up to him and buzzed conversationally. Eventually, when they went back to the lie, he took up his wrestling where he had left it off. He began to patch together his Saturday ideal of Isaac Ford, and for cement he used a cunning and subtle logic. It was the sort that is compounded in the brain laboratories of egoists, and it worked. It was incontrovertible that his father had been made of finer clay than those about him, but still old Isaac had only been in the process of becoming, i.e. Percival Ford had become. As proof of it, he rehabilitated his father and at the same time exalted himself. His lean little ego waxed to colossal proportions. He were great enough to forgive. He glowed at the thought of it. Isaac Ford had been great, but he were greater, for he could forgive. Isaac Ford and even restore him the holy place in his memory, though the place were not quite so holy as it had been. Also he applauded Isaac Ford for having ignored the outcome as one step aside. Very well, he too would ignore it. The dance was breaking up. The orchestra had finished. Aloha was preparing to go home. Percival Ford clapped his hands for the Japanese circle. You tell that man I want to see him, he said, pointing at Joe Garland. Tell him to come here now. Joe Garland approached and halted respectfully several places away, nervously fingering the guitar which he still carried. The other did not ask him to sit down. You are my brother, he said. Why, everybody knows that. The reply in tones of wonderment. Yes, I understand, Percival Ford said dryly. I did not know it till this evening. The half-brother waited uncomfortably in the silence that followed, during which Percival Ford coolly considered his next utterance. You remember that first time I came to school and the boys ducked me? He asked. Why did you take my part? The half-brother smiled bashfully. Because you knew? Yes, that was why. But I didn't know, Percival Ford said in the same dry fashion. Yes, the other said. Another silence fell. Servants were beginning to put the lights on the lanai. You know now? The half-brother said simply. Percival Ford frowned. He looked the other on over with a considering eye. How much will you take to leave the islands and never come back? He demanded. And never come back? Joe Garland faltered. Is the only land I... No. Other lands are cold. I do not know other lands. I have many friends here. In other lands there would not be one voice to say aloha, Joe, my boy. I said to never come back, Percival Ford reiterated. The Alameda sails tomorrow for San Francisco. Joe Garland was bewildered. But why? He asked. You know now that we are brothers. That is why, was the retort. As you said yourself, everyone knows. I will make it worth your while. All awkwardness and embarrassment disappeared from Joe Garland. Berth and station were bridged to reverse. You want me to go? He demanded. I want you to go and to never come back, Percival Ford answered. And in that moment, flashing and fleeting, it was given to him to see his brother tower above him like a mountain, and feel himself dwindle and dwarf to microscopic insignificance. It is not well for one to see himself truly, nor can one see himself so for long and live, and only for that flashing moment did Percival Ford see himself and his brother in true perspective. The next moment he was mastered by his meagre and insatiable ego. As I said, I will make it worth your while. You will not suffer, I will pay you well. All right, Joe Garland said. I'll go. He started to turn away. Joe, I called, you see my lawyer tomorrow morning. 500 down and 200 a month, as long as you stay away. You are very kind, Joe Garland answered softly. You are too kind. And anyway, I guess I don't want your money. I'll go tomorrow on the Alameda. He walked away, but he did not say goodbye. Percival Ford clapped his hands. Boy, he said to the Japanese, a lemonade. And over the lemonade, he smiled long and contentedly to himself. Well, no dogs in that one, and no actual gold, well, there's money, but I think that's a story about transformation. Perhaps not quite transformation, perhaps becoming. Two sons of the same father, both very different men. And we got to see through the eyes of a very unpleasant one. I mean, the father himself sounds an unpleasant man too. Claimed to be righteous and of the cloth, and taken from people he's supposed to save. 50,000 acres at $1 an acre. Criminal. I mean, building schools and hospitals is admirable enough, but he strikes me a very unpleasant sort of man. And I expect all those people who see him were unpleasant. I don't understand how humans judge one another like this. A different breed, less than me. A mad thing, I think. Well, I suppose saying that, Jack London himself sort of thinks it. You see it in him. As much as I've forgotten his name, the fellow whose eyes we were seeing through, the right hand brother, saw himself better. We can see through Jack London's eyes as well. And he sees Joe, the better brother. A better man. But I don't know if it's a breeding that you think that. There's some element of it, size, and broadness and muscularity. In fact, there is definitely an element of that. With a brother who we see as, or who we see the eyes through, is smaller and lesser. But also there is a bigness of spirit, an oldness of personhood. I love the music, which maybe that's a theme too. Music being sacred, although it's only in 2 stories. Is it? I guess in All Gold Canyon there's a bit of it. I don't know. Too early to say, I suppose. Still, I think it's strange how people judge and rank themselves on arbitrary ways, and even in non-arbitrary ways. A rat's a rat. I think in the same way a man is a man, but he lies to himself about it. Does what he can to place himself above other men in his own ends. A strange thing, almost a wonderful thing. Imagine having the luxury. Spend all that time, have all that time free that you must spend time devising ways to make yourself bigger. I think if I spent so much time I'd be dead. I do not have it to spare. Anyhow, let's keep on then, shall we? Shall we? Well, a couple more things to know. I suppose I'm supposed to do analysis. It's a new place we're at. Warm for a change. No horrid cold Yukon. Well, I suppose by his own accounts, your fellow Joe would do quite well in the Yukon. It's been a character Jack London gives to him and the men who succeed there. A lot of unfamiliar words too. I don't know the place he speaks of, but it seems pleasant enough. Aside from the company, I suppose. Maybe not if 50,000 acres of it is owned by that sort of man. And the people he looks down on seem very pleasant. And military men. We don't see much of them, though they're mentioned. And I guess through the approval of the character who we do see, that Jack London has a sort of approval of them. Don't know much of military men outside of what I read in The Art of War. Another thing to learn. There seems to be so much of it. And no dogs in this one. A shame. Oh well. Right. So. That spot. Let's get to it. So I should never get done. There we are. Oh, there. That spot. I don't think much of Stephen McKay anymore. I used to swear by him. I know in those days I loved him more than my own brother. If ever I meet Stephen McKay again, I should not be responsible for my actions. It passes beyond me that a man with whom I shared food and blanket, and with whom I mushed over the Chilcoot Trail, should turn out the way he did. I always saw Steve up as a square man, a kindly comrade without an iota of anything vindictive and malicious in his nature. I should never trust my judgment in men again. Why, I nursed that man through typhoid fever. We starved together in the headwaters of the Stewart, and he saved my life on the Little Salmon, and now, after the years we were together, all I can say of Stephen McKay is that he's the meanest man I ever knew. We started for the Klondike in the full rush of 1897, and we started too late to get over Chilcoot Pass before the freeze up. We packed our outfit on our backs, part way over, and the snow began to fly, and then we had to buy dogs in order to sled it the rest of the way. That was how we came to get that spot. Dogs were high, and we paid $110 for him. He looked worth it. I say look, because he was one of the finest appearing dogs I ever saw. He weighed 60 pounds, and he had all the lines of a good sled animal. We never could make out his breed, and he wasn't husky, nor Malamute nor Hudson Bay. He looked like all of them, and he didn't look like any of them, and on top of it all he had some of the white man's dog in him, for on one side of the thick of the mixed yellow-brown, red and dirty white, that was his prevailing colour, there was a spot of coal black, as big as a water bucket. That was why we called him Spot. He were a good looker, all right. When he were in condition, his muscles stood out in bunches all over him, and he were the strongest looking brute I ever saw in Alaska. Also the most intelligent looking. Run your eyes over him, you'd think he could outpull 3 dogs of his own weight. Maybe you could, but I never saw it. His intelligence didn't run that way. He could steal and forage to perfection. He had an instinct that was positively gruesome for divining when work was to be done and for making a sneak accordingly, and for getting lost and not staying lost. He was nothing short of inspired. When it came to work, where the intelligence dribbled out of him, and the way that intelligence dribbled out of him and left him a mere clot of wobbling, stupid jelly would make your heart beat. At times when I think it wasn't stupidity, maybe like some men he knew, he was too wise to work. I shouldn't wonder if he put it all over us with that intelligence of his. Maybe he figured it all out and decided that licking now and again and no work were a whole lot better than work all the time and no licking. He were intelligent enough for such a computation, I tell you. I sat and looked into the dog's eyes till the shivers ran up and down my spine, and the marrow cooled like yeast. Now, what the intelligence I saw shine now? I can't express myself about that intelligence. It is beyond mere words. I saw it, that's all. At times it were like gazing into a human soul, the look in his eyes. And what I saw there frightened me and startled all sorts of ideas of my own mind, reincarnation and all the rest. I tell you, I sensed something big in that brute's eyes. There were a message there. I wasn't big enough myself to catch it. Wherever it was, I know I'm making a fool of myself, whatever it was, it baffled me. I can't give an inkling of what I saw in that brute's eyes. It wasn't light, it wasn't colour, it was something that moved away back, and the eyes themselves weren't moving. And I guess I didn't see it move either, I only sensed it move. It was an expression, that's what it was, and I got an impression of it. No, it was different from a mere expression, it was more than that. I don't know what it was, it gave me a feeling of kinship just the same. Oh no, not sentimental kinship. It was rather a kinship of equality. Those eyes never pleaded like a deer's eyes. They challenged. No, it wasn't defiance. It was just a calm assumption of equality. I don't think it was deliberate. I believe it were unconscious on his part. It was there because it was there, and it couldn't be helped shine now. No, I don't mean shine. It did shine, it moved. I know I'm talking wrong, but if you looked in that animal's eyes the way I have, you'd understand. Steve were affected the same way I was. Why, I tried to kill that spot once, and he went over for anything, and I fell down on it. I led him out into the brush, and he came along, slow and unwilling. He knew what was going on. I stopped and I lighted a place, put my foot on the rope, and pulled my big colt. And that dog sat down and looked at me, I tell you. Didn't plead, he just looked. And I saw all kinds of incomprehensible things moving. Yes, moving in those eyes of his. I didn't really see them move. I thought I saw them. Well, as I said before, I guess I only sensed them. And I want to tell you right now that it got beyond me. It was like killing a man. A conscious, brave man who looked calmly into your gun and said, as much as to say, who's afraid? And too, the message seemed near that instead of pulling the trigger quick, I stopped to see if I could catch the message. There it was, right before me, glimmering all around in those eyes of his. And then it was too late. I got scared. I was trembling all over and my stomach generated a nervous palpitation that made me seasick. I just sat down and looked at that dog, and he looked at me, and I thought we were going crazy. You know what? You want to know what I did? I threw down the gun and ran back to camp with the fear of God in my heart. Steve laughed at me, but I noticed that Steve led Spot into the woods a week later for the same purpose. And then Steve came back alone, and a little later Spot drifted back too. At any rate, Spot wouldn't work. We paid $110 for him at the bottom of our sack. It wouldn't work. He wouldn't even tighten the traces. Steve spoke to him the first time we put in an harness, and he sort of shivered. That were all. Not an ounce on the traces. He just stood still and wobbled like so much jelly. Steve touched him with a whip. He yelped, but not an ounce. Steve touched him again, a bit harder, and he howled, the regular long wolf howl. And Steve got mad, gave him half a dozen, and I came on the run from the tent. I told Steve that we were brutal with the animal, and we had some words, first we'd ever had. He threw the whip down into the snow and walked away mad. I picked up and went to it. That Spot trembled and wobbled and cowered before ever I swung the lash, and with the first bite of it he howled like a lost soul. Next day he lay down in the snow. I started the rest of the dogs, and they dragged him along while I threw the whip into him. He rolled over on his back and bumped along, his forelegs waving in the air, himself howling as though we were going through a sausage machine. Steve came back and laughed at me, and I apologised for what I'd said. There were no getting any work out of that Spot, and to make up for it, he was the biggest pig glutton of a dog I ever saw. On top of that, he was the cleverest thief. There were no circumventing him. Many a breakfast we went without our bacon because Spot had been there first. And because of him that we nearly starved to death up at Stewart. He figured out the way to break into our meat cache, and what he didn't eat, the rest of the team did. He were impartial. He stole from everybody. He were a restless dog, all very busy, snooping around or going somewhere. And there were never a camp within 5 miles that he didn't raid. The worst of it was that he always came back to us to play his odd bill, which was just being the law of the land. It was mighty hard on us, especially the first winter on the Chilcut, when we were ousted, paying for a whole ham's and sides of bacon that we never ate. He could fight too, that Spot. He could do everything but work. He never pulled a pound, but he was the boss of the old team. The way he made those dogs stand around was an education. He bullied them, and there were always one or more of them fresh marked with his fangs. He was more than a bully. He wasn't afraid of anything that walked on 4 legs. I've seen him march single-handed into a strange team without any provocation whatsoever, put the carbosh on the old outfit. Did I say he could eat? I caught him eating the whip once. That's straight. He started in at the lash, and when I caught him, he was down the handle and still going. He were a good looker. At the end of the first week, we sold them for $75 to the mounted police. They had experienced dog drivers, and we knew that by the time he'd covered the 600 miles to Dawson, he'd be a good sled dog. I say we knew, for we was just getting acquainted with that Spot. A little later, we were not brash enough to know anything when he were concerned. A week later, we woke up in the morning to the dangest dog fight we'd ever heard. With that Spot come back and knocking the team into shape. We had a pretty depressive breakfast, I can tell you. It cheered up 2 hours afterwards when we sold them to an official carrier bound into Dawson with the government dispatches. That Spot were only 3 days to come back, and as usual, we celebrated his arrival with a roughhouse. We spent the winter and spring, after our own outfits was across the pass, freighting other people's outfits, and we made a fat stake. Also, we made money at the Spot. If we sold him once, we sold him 20 times. He always come back, and no one else for their money. We didn't want the money. We'd have paid handsomely for anyone to take him off our hands, for keeps. We had to get rid of him. We couldn't give him away, for that would have been suspicious. He was such a fine looker that we never had any difficulty in selling him. I'm broke, we'd say, and they'd pay an old price for him. We sold him as low as $25, and once we got $150 for him. That particular party returned him in person, refused to take his money back, and the way he abused us was something awful. He said it would cheapen the price to tell us what he thought of us, and we felt he was so justified that we never talked back. But to this day, I've never quite regained all the old self-respect of mine before that man talked to me. When the ice cleared out of the lakes and river, we put our outfit in a Lake Bennett boat and started for Dawson. We had a good team of dogs, and of course we piled them on top of the outfit. That Spot were along, there were no losing him. A dozen times the first day he knocked one or another of the dogs overboard in the course of fighting with them. We were close quarters and he didn't like being crowded. What that dog needs is space, Steve said the second day. Let's maroon him. We did, run the boat in at Caribou's Crossing for him to jump ashore. Two of the other dogs, good dogs, followed him, and we lost 2 whole days trying to find them. We never saw those 2 dogs again, but the quietness and relief we enjoyed made us decide, like the man who refused his 150, that we were cheap at the price. For the first time in months, Steve and I laughed and whistled and sang. We were as happy as clams. The dark days were over, nightmare had been lifted, that spot was gone. 3 weeks later, one morning, Steve and I were just standing on the riverbank at Dawson. A small boat was just arriving from Lake Bâtard. I saw Steve give a start and heard him say something that was not so nice, and were not under his breath. Then I looked, and there, in the bow of the boat, with ears pricked up, sat Spot. Steve and I sneaked immediately, like beaten curs, like cowards, like absconders from justice. With this last, the lieutenant of police thought when he saw us sneaking. He surmised that there were law officers in the boat who were after us. He didn't wait to find out, but kept us in sight, and the M&M saloon got us in a corner. We had a merry time explaining, for we refused to go back to the boat and meet Spot, and finally he held us under guard of another policeman while he went to the boat. After we got clear of him, we started for the cabin, and when we arrived, there was that Spot sitting on the stoop and waiting for us. Now, how did he know we lived there? There were 40,000 people in Dawson that summer. How did he savvy our cabin out of all the cabins? How did he know we were in Dawson anyway? I leave it to you. But don't forget what I have said about his intelligence and the immortal something I have seen glimmer in his eyes. There were no getting rid of him anymore. There were too many people in Dawson who had brought him up to chill cook, and the story got around. Half a dozen times we put him on board steamboats going down the Yukon, but he merely went ashore at the first landing and tried back up the bank. We couldn't sell him, we couldn't kill him, though both Steve and I had tried. Nobody else were able to kill him. He bore a charm laugh. I've seen him go down in a dogfight on the main street with 50 dogs on top of him, and when they were separated, he'd appear on all his 4 legs unarmed, while 2 of the dogs that had been on top of him would be lying dead. I saw him steal a chunk of moose fat from Major Dimwid's cache so heavy that it could just keep one jump ahead of Miss Dimwid's squaw cook, who was after him with an axe. As he went up the hill after the squaw gave up, Major Dimwid himself came out and pumped his Winchester into the landscape. He emptied the magazine twice and never touched that spot. Then a policeman came along and arrested him for discharging firearms inside the city limits. Major Dimwid paid his fine, and Steve and I paid him for the moose meat at the rate of $1 a pound, bones and all. That was what he paid for it. I think we were owed that year. I'm only telling what I saw with my own eyes. And now I'll tell you something also. I saw that spot fall through a water hole. The ice was 3.5 feet thick, and the current sucked him under like a straw. 300 yards below was the big water hole used by the hospital. Spot crawled out of the hospital water hole, licked off the water, bit out the ice that had formed between his toes, trotted out the bank, and whipped a big Newfoundland belonging to the Gold Commissioner. In the fall of 1898, Steve and I pulled up the Yukon in the last water, bound for Stewart River. We took the dogs along, all except Spot. We figured we'd been feeding him long enough. He'd cost us more than time and trouble and money and grub than we'd got by selling them on the Chilka, especially grub. So Steve and I tied him down in the cabin and pulled our freight. We camped that night at the mouth of the Indian River, and Steve and I were pretty facetious over having shaken it. Steve were a funny cuss, and I was just sitting up in the blankets and laughing when a tornado hit camp. The way the Spot walked into those dogs and gave them what for was hair-raising. Now, how did he get loose? It's up to you. I haven't any theory. And how did he get across the Klondike River? That's another facet. And anyway, how did he know we'd gone up the Yukon? You see, we went by water, and he couldn't smell our cracks. Steve and I began to get superstitious about that dog. He got on our nerves too, and between you and me, we were just a mite afraid of him. The freeze came on when we were in the mouth of the Anderson Creek, and we traded them off for 2 sacks of flour to an outfit that were bound up White River after copper. That whole outfit were lost. Never trace nor hide nor hair of men, dogs, sleds, or anything were ever found. They dropped clean out of sight. It became one of the mysteries of the country. Steve and I plunged away up the Stewart, and 6 weeks afterward, that Spot crawled into camp. We were a perambulating skeleton. We couldn't just drag along, but he got there. What I want to know is who told him we were up the Stewart. Who could have gone 1,000 other places? How do you know? You tell me and I'll tell you. No losing him. At the Mayo he started a row with an Indian dog. The buck who owned the dog took a swing at Spot with an axe, missed him and killed his own dog. Talk about magic and turning bullets aside. I for one consider it a blame sight harder to turn an axe aside with a big buck at the other end of it. And I saw him do it with my own eyes. That buck didn't want to kill his own dog. You've got to show me. I told you about Spot breaking into our meat cache. It was nearly the death of us. There weren't any more meat to be killed, and meat were all we had to live on. The moose gone back several hundred miles to the Indians, and the Indians with them. There we were. Spring was on, and we had to wait for the river to break. We got pretty thin before we decided to eat the dogs. We decided to eat the spot first. You know what that dog did? He sneaked. Now, how do you know our minds were made up to eat him? We sat up nights laying for him, but he never come back. And we ate the other dogs. We ate the whole team. Now for the sequel. You know what it is when a big river breaks up and a few billion tons of ice go out, jamming and milling and grinding? Just in the thick of it. When the steward went out, rumbling and roaring, we sighted Spot out in the middle. He got caught and was trying to cross up somewhere. Steve and I yelled and shouted and ran up and down the bank, tossing our hats in the air. Sometimes we stop and hug each other. We were that boisterous. We saw Spot's finish. He didn't have a chance in a million. He didn't have any chance at all. After the ice run, we got into a canoe and paddled down the Yukon and down to the Yukon and down the Yukon to Dawson, stopping to feed up for a week in the cabins at the mouth of Henderson Creek. As we came in the banks of Dawson, there sat Spot, waiting for us, his ears pricked up, his tail wagging, his mouth smiling, extending a hearty welcome to us. Now, how did he get out of the ice? How did he know we were coming to Dawson at that very hour and minute, and be out there on that bank waiting for us? The more I think of that Spot, the more I am convinced that there are things in this world that go beyond science. On no scientific grounds can that Spot be explained. It's psychic phenomena, or mysticism, or something of that sort, I guess, with a lot of theosophy thrown in it. The Klondike is a good country. I might have been there yet, and become a millionaire if it hadn't been for Spot. He got on my nerves. I stood him for 2 years altogether, and then I guess my stamina broke. It was the summer of 1899 when I pulled out. I didn't say anything to Steve, I just sneaked. I fixed it up alright. I wrote Steve a note and enclosed the package with rough on rats by telling him what to do with it. I was worn down to skin and bone by that Spot, and I was that nervous that I jumped and looked around when there wasn't anybody within hailing distance. It was astounding the way I recuperated when I got quit of him. I got back £20 for I arrived in San Francisco, and by the time I crossed the ferry to Oakland, I was my old self again. So even my wife looked in vain for any change in me. Steve wrote to me once, and his letter seemed irritated. He took it kind of hard because I'd left him the Spot. Also, he said he'd used the rough on rats per directions, and there were nothing doing. I yielded. I'm back in the office and prospering in all ways. Oh! Again, every time there's someone here, they sell things. Go on with you. Oh. Steve wrote to me once, and his letter seemed irritated. Took it in kind of hard because I'd left him with Spot. Also, he said he'd used the rough and rats per directions, and said there were nothing doing. A year went by. I'm back in the office and prospering in all ways, and even getting a bit of fat. And then Steve arrived. He didn't look at me up. I read his name in the steamer list and wondered why. I didn't wander long. I got up one morning and found that Spot chained to the gatepost and holding up the milkman. Steve went north to Seattle alone that very morning. I didn't put on any more weight. My wife made me buy him a collar and tag, and within an hour he showed her his gratitude by killing her pet Persian cat. There is no getting rid of that Spot. He will be with me until I die, for he will never die. My appetite is not so good since he arrived, and my wife says I am looking peaked. Last night that Spot got into Mr. Harvey's hen house. Harvey is my next door neighbour, and killed 19 of his fancy bred chickens. I shall have to pay for them. My neighbours on the other side quarrelled with my wife and then moved out. Spot were the cause of it. And that is why I am disappointed in Stephen Mackay. I had no idea he was so mean a man. That is a good story. I like that one. Seems like a bit of payback from dogs to men. I want a bit to be envious of that Spot in his ability. Seems a good thing to me. To be able to, what should I call it? What am I saying? Look, it seems a good thing to me to be able to defy death in such a manner. A good thing as well to be able to, well, find your way and get by on so much. That luck. Seems to be a very good thing. Very good thing indeed. Yeah. I mean, I suspect there's something to it. I assume that, well, I guess it's a story, so it could just be made up. But it does sound like the sort of thing that might come out of one of them screaming book slamps. Always telling me aren't any good for us. I find myself quite envious of the abilities. Let's see. This does, well, I guess I was about to say it doesn't have any of the transformation, but it's got a very present theme of dog. It's a dog of an unusual sort. Generally, when you have a dog that is described like he was described physically, London makes him a very fine dog indeed. Even Bâtard will like that. that spot is something of a menace. I don't want to call him wicked, for he doesn't seem in any way to be seeking to do anyone. Well, I mean, he steals food, but that's pretty natural. I couldn't argue against him for that. He never seemed to intentionally do anyone no harm. But then harm is done to people, I suppose. I suppose that's true by the vagaries of life, isn't it? You exist in the world and you do harm to people. Food you eat is food that others cannot eat. No, I don't strike him. He doesn't strike me as a wicked beast. They don't strike me as one too virtuous neither. A sort of middle of the road. I think perhaps I'd dislike him if I wasn't quite so envious of his abilities. I should quite like to be able to get out of any situation by luck. But by Gar we must live and by Gar we must go. Unless Lamp is willing to change his opinion on me reading them screamy books, Lamp. Yeah, I didn't think so. So, until such a time as Lamp changes his mind, which I do not ever see him doing, I will have no magic of my own, and so must subsist on cheese and on Gar. And since I need more cheese, let us move then to the Nightborn. Second to last of these stories. These ones I think is a bit shorter than the ones we had yesterday, so my authority seems to be holding up a bit better. I think I can get through the remaining two pretty well, and then, you know, something for tomorrow I'll have to find, but let's be about it, eh? There we are. The Nightborn. We were in the old Alda Inyo Club, a warm night for San Francisco, and through the open windows, Austin far, came the brawl of the streets. The talk had led on from the graft prosecution, the latest signs that the town was to be run wide open, down through all the grotesque sordidness and rottenness of man-hate and man-meanness, until the name of O'Brien was mentioned. O'Brien, the promising young pugilist who had been killed in the prize ring the night before. And once the air seemed to freshen. O'Brien had been a clean-living young man with ideals. He neither drank nor smoked nor swore, and his had been the body of a beautiful young god. He had even carried his prayer book on the to the ringside. I found it in his coat pocket in the dressing room afterward. Here was youth, clean and wholesome, unsullied, a thing of glory and wonder for men to conjure with, after it had been lost to them and they had turned middle-aged. And so well did we conjure that romance came and for an hour led us far from the man city and its snarling rule. Bardwell, in a way, started it by quoting from Thoreau, but we're after all. It was old Threfton, old Adam and Dewlap who took up the quotation, for the hour to come was romance incarnate. At first we might have wondered how many scotches he had consumed since dinner, but very soon all that was forgotten. It was in 1898. Struggling a bit here. It was in 1898. I was 35 then, he says. Yes, I know you are adding it up. You're right. 47 now. 10 years more. And the doctors say, damn the doctors anyway. He lifted the long glass to his lips and sipped it slowly to soothe away his irritation. But I was young. Once I was young 12 years ago. I had hair on top of my head and my stomach was lean as a runner's. And the longest day was none too long for me. I was a husky back there. In 98. You remember me, Milner? You knew me then. Wasn't I a pretty good bit of all right? Milner nodded and agreed. Like Threfton, you were another mining engineer who had cleaned up a fortune in the Klondike. You certainly were, old man, Milner said. I'll never forget when you cleaned out those lumberjacks in the M&M. Had neither the newspapermen stirred the row. Slavin were in the country at the time. This to us, and his manager wanted to get up a match with Threfton. Well, look at me now, Threfton commanded angrily. That's what old Godstead did to me. God knows how many millions, but nothing left in my soul, nor in my veins. The good red blood is gone. I am a jellyfish, a huge gross man of oscillating protoplasm, eh? Eh? But language failed him, and he drew solace from the long glass. Women looked at me, then turned their heads to look a second time. Strange that I never married. The girl, that's what I started to tell you about. I married 1,000 miles from anywhere, and then some. And she quoted to me the very words of Thoreau that Bardwell quoted a moment ago. Ones about the day-born gods and the night-born. It was after I had made my location on Goldstead and didn't know what a treasure I thought that creek was going to prove that I made that trip east over the Rockies, angling across to the Great Slave. Up north there, the Rockies are something more than a backbone. They're a boundary, a dividing line, a wall impregnable and unscalable. There is no intercourse across them, though on occasion from the early days wandering trappers across them. The more were lost by the way than ever came through, and it was precisely why I tackled the job. It was a traverse any man would be proud to make. I am prouder of it right now than anything else I have ever done. It is an unknown land. Great stretches of it have never been explored. There are big valleys there where the white man has never seen set foot, and Indian tribes as primitive as 10,000 years, almost. They have had some contact with the whites. Parties of them come out once in a while and trade, and that is all. Even the Hudson Bay Company failed to find them and farm them. And now the girl. I was coming up a stream, called a river in California, uncharted and unnamed. It was a noble valley, now shut in by high canyon walls, and again opening out into beautiful stretches, wide and long, with pastures shoulder high in the bottoms, meadow dotted with flowers, and clumps of timber, spruce, virgin, and magnificent. The dogs were packing on their backs, and were sore-footed and played out, while I was looking for any bunch of Indians to get sleds and drivers from, and go on with the first snow. It was late fall, but the way those flowers persisted surprised me. I was supposed to be in subarctic America, and high up among the buttresses of the Rockies, and yet there was that everlasting spread of flowers. Some day the white settler would be in there, and growing wheat down all that valley. Then I left a smoke, and heard the barking of the dogs, the Indian dogs, and came into camp. There must have been 500 of them, proper Indians at that, and I could see by the jerking frames of the full hunting had been good. Then I met her, Lucy, that was her name. Sign language, that was all we could talk with, till they led me to a big fly, half a tent, open on one side where a campfire burned. It was all of moose skins, this fly, moose skins, smoke-cured, hand-drubbed, and golden brown. Under it everything was neat and orderly, as no Indian camp ever was. The bed was laid in fresh spruce boughs, there were furs galore, and on top of all that was a robe of swan skins, white swan skins. I have never seen anything like that robe. And on top of it, sitting cross-legged, was Lucy. She was not brown. I've called her a girl, but she was not. She was a woman, a nut brown woman, an Amazon, a full-blooded, full-bodied woman, and royal bright, and her eyes were blue. That's what took me off my feet. Her eyes, blue, not china blue, but deep blue, like the sea and sky all melted into one, and very wise. More than that, they had laughter in them, warm laughter, sun-warm and human, very human. Shall I say feminine? They were. They were a woman's eyes, a proper woman's eyes. You know what that means. Can I say more? Also in those blue eyes was, at the same time, a wild unrest, a wistful yearning, and a repose, an absolute repose, a sort of all-wise and philosophical calm. Brethren broke off abruptly. You fellows think I am screwed. I am not. This is only my 5th since dinner. I am dead sober. I am solemn. I sit here now, side by side with my sacred youth. It is not I, old Trethven, that talks. It is my youth. It is my youth that says those the most wonderful eyes I have ever seen. So very calm, so very restless, so very wise, so very curious, so very old, so very young, so satisfied and yet yearning so wistfully. Words I can't describe them. When I've told you about her, you may know better for yourself. She did not stand up, but put out her hand. Stranger, she said, I'm real glad to see you. I leave it to you, that sharp frontier, western tang of speech. Picture my sensations. There was a woman, a white woman. That tang, it was amazing that it should be a white woman here, beyond the last boundary of the world. The tang, I tell you, it hurt. It was like the stab of a flattered nose, and yet let me tell you, that woman was a poet. You shall see. She dismissed all the Indians, and by Jove, they went. They took her orders and followed her blind. She was high Uskook in chief. She told the bucks to make a camp for me and to take care of my dogs, and they did, too. And they knew enough not to get away with much, as a moccasin lace on my outfit. She was a regular she who must be obeyed, and I want to tell you, it chilled me to the marrow, sent those little thrills marathoning up and down my spinal column, meeting a white woman out there at the head of a tribe of savages, 1,000 miles the other side of no man's land. Stranger, she said, I reckon you're sure the first white that ever set foot in this valley. Sit down and talk a spell, and then we'll have a bite to eat. Which way might you be coming? Oh, it was that tang again. But from now to the end of the yarn, I want you to forget it. I tell you I forgot it, sitting there on the edge of that swanskin robe and listening and looking at the most wonderful woman that ever stepped out of the pages of Thoreau or any other man's book. I stayed on there a week, and was on her invitation. She promised to fit me up with dogs and sleds and with Indians that would put me across the best pass of the Rockies in 500 miles. The floe was pitched apart from the others, on the high bank by the river, and a couple of Indian girls did her cooking, and before her in the camp work. So we talked and talked, while the first snow fell and continued to fall, and make a surface for my sleds. And this was her story. She was frontier-born, poor settlers, and you know what that means. Work, work, always work, work in plenty and without end. I never seen the glory of the world, she said. I had no time. I knew it was right out there, anywhere, all around the cabin, but there was always the bread to set, the scrubbing and the washing and the work that was never done. I used to be plumb sick at times just to get out into it all, especially in the spring when the songs of the birds drove me most clean crazy. I wanted to run out through the long pasture grass, wet my legs with the dew of it, climb on the rail fence and keep on through the timber and up and up and over the divide so as to get a look around. Oh, I had all kinds of hankerings. Follow up the canyon beds, slosh around from pool to pool, make friends with the water dogs and the speckly trout. The people in the sky and watch the squirrels and rabbits and see small furry things and see what it was they were doing and learn the secrets of their ways. It seemed to me if I had time I could crawl among the flowers and, if I was good and quiet, catch them whispering with themselves, doing all kind of wise things that mere humans never knew. Griffin paused to see that his glass had been refilled. Another time, she said, I wanted to run nights like a wild thing, just to run through the moonshine under the stars, run white and naked in the darkness that I knew must feel like cool velvet, and run and keep on running. One evening, plumb tuckered out, it had been a dreadful hot day, and the bread wouldn't raise, and all the churn had gone wrong. I was all irritated and jerky. But that evening, I made mention to Dad of this wanting to run of mine. He looked at me, curious some, and a bit scared. Then he gave me 2 pills to take, said to go to bed and get a good sleep, and I'd be all hunky-dory in the morning. So I never mentioned my hankerings to him or anyone anymore. Mountain home broke up, starved out, I imagine, and the family came to Seattle now. There she worked in a factory, long hours, you know, and all the rest, deadly work. After a year of that, she became a waitress in a cheap restaurant, hashling as she called it. She said to me once, romance, I guess, was what I wanted. But there wasn't no romance floating around in dishpans and wash tubs or in factories and ash joints. When she was 18, she married a man who was going up to Juneau to start a restaurant. He had a few dollars saved and appeared prosperous. She didn't love him, she was emphatic about that. But she was all tired out, and she wanted to get away from the drudgery. Besides, Juneau was in Alaska, and her yearning took the form of a desire to see that wonderful wonderland. But little she saw of it. He started the restaurant, a little cheap one, and she quickly learned what he had married her for, to save paying wages. She came pretty close to running the joint, and doing all the work from waiting to dishwashing. She cooked most of the time as well, and she had 4 years of it. Can't you picture her, this wild woods creature, quick with every old primitive instinct, yearning for the free open, and mowed up in a little hash joint, and toiling and moiling for 4 mortal years? There was no meaning in anything, she said. What was it all about? Why was I born? Was that all the meaning of life? Just to work and be always tired? You go to bed tired, and to wake up tired, with every day like every other day, unless it were harder? She had heard talk of immortal life from the gospel sharp, she said, but could not reckon that what she was doing was like a likely preparation for immortality. But she still had her dreams, and more rarely. She had read a few books, with what, it is pretty hard to imagine, seaside library novels most likely, yet they had been food for her fancy. Sometimes, she said, when I was that dizzy from the eating and the cooking that I didn't take a breath of fresh air or faint, I'd stick my head out the kitchen window and close my eyes, and see most wonderful things. All of a sudden I'd be travelling down a country road, and everything clean and quiet, no dust, no dirt. The streams rippling down sweet meadows and lambs playing, breezes blowing, the breaths of flowers, and soft sunshine over everything. Lovely cows, lazy and knee-deep in quiet pools, and young girls bathing a curve of stream, all white and slim and natural. And I'd know I was in Arcady. I'd read about that country once in a book. And maybe nights, all flashing in the sun, would come riding around the bend in the road, or a lady on a milk-white mare, and in the distance I could see the towers of a castle rising. Or I just knew on the next turn that I'd come upon some palace all white and airy and fairy-like, with fountains playing, and flowers all over everything, and peacocks on the lawn. And I'd open my eyes, and the heat of the cooking range would stir on me, and I'd hear Jake saying, he was my husband, I'd hear Jake saying, why ain't you served them beans? Think I can wait here all day? Romance. I reckon the nearest I ever came to it was when a drunken Armenian cook got the snakes and tried to cut my throat with a potato knife, and I got my arm burned on the stove before I could lay him out with a potato stump. I wanted easy ways and lovely things, romance and all that, but it just seemed I had no luck nowhere. I was only expressly born for cooking and dishwashing. There was a wild crowd in Juneau them days, but I looked at the other women and their way of life didn't excite me. I reckon I wanted to be clean. I didn't know why, I just wanted to, I guess, and reckon I might as well die dishwashing as die their way. Griffin halted in his tale for a moment, completing to himself some thread of thought. And this is the woman I met up there in the Arctic, running a tribe of wild Indians and a few thousand square miles of hunting territory. And it happened simply enough. Though for that matter she might have lived and died among the pots and pans. Came the whisper, came the vision. That was all she needed and she got it. I woke up one day, she said, just happened on it in a scrap of newspaper. Remembered every word of it, and I can give it to you. And then she quoted Thoreau's cry of the human. Young pines springing up in the cornfield from the eddy air are to me a refreshing fact. They talk of civilizing the Indian, but that is not the same name for his improvement. By the wary independence and aloofness of his dim forest life, he preserves his intercourse with his native gods, and is admitted from time to time to a rare and peculiar society with nature. He has glances of starry recognition to which our saloons are strangers. The steady illumination of his genius, dim only because distant, is like the faint but satisfying light of the stars, compared with the dazzling but ineffectual and short-lived blaze of candles. The Society Islanders had their day-born gods. They were not supposed to be of equal antiquity, the night-born gods. That's what she did, repeated word for word, and I forgot the tang, for it was solemn, a declaration of religion, pagan if you will, and clothed in the living garmenture of the sun. And the rest of it was torn away, she added, great emptiness in her voice. But we're only a scrap of newspaper. That Thoreau was a wise man. I wish I knew more about him. She stopped a moment, and I swear her face was ineffably holy as she said, I could have made him a good wife. And then she went on, I knew right away as soon as I read that what was the matter with me. I was a nightborn. I, who had lived all my life with the dayborn, was a nightborn. That was why I had never been satisfied with cooking and dishwashing. That was why I had hankered to run naked in the moonlight. And I knew this dirty little Juneau hash joint was no place for me. And right there and then I said I quit. I packed up my few rags of clothes and started. Jake saw me and tried to stop me. What are you doing, he says. Divorcing you and me. I say, I'm heading for the tall timber and where I belong. No, you don't, he says, reaching for me to stop me. The cooking has got to your head. You listen to me talk before you up and do anything brash. I called the gun, a little Colt 44, and says this does my talking for me. And I left. Grafton emptied his glass and called for another. Boys, you know what that girl did? She was 22. She'd spent her life over a dishpan and she knew no more about the world than I do of the fourth dimension or the fifth. All roads led her to her desire. No, she didn't head for the distant hills. The Alaskan panhandle is preferable to travel by water. She went down to the beach. An Indian canoe was starting for Drea. You know the kind cut out a single tree, narrow and deep and 60 feet long. She gave them a couple of dollars and got on board. Romance, she told me. It was romance from the jump. There were 3 families all together in that canoe, and that crowded there wasn't room to turn around, with dogs and Indian babies sprawling over everything, and everybody dipping a paddle and making that canoe go. And all around the great solemn mountains, tangled drifts of clouds and sunshine, and oh, the silence. Great wonderful silence. And once the smoke of a hunter's camp away off in the distance, trailing out among the trees. It was like a picnic, a grand picnic, and I could see my dream coming true. I was ready for something to happen most any time, and it did. And that first camp on the island, and the boys spearing fish in the mouth of the creek, and a big deer one of the bucks shot just around the point. And there were flowers everywhere, and then back from the beach the grass was thick and lush and neck high. And some of the girls went through with me, and we climbed the hillside behind them, picked berries and roots, and tasted sour and were good to eat. And we came upon a big bear in the berries, making a supper. He said, oof, and ran away as scared as we were. And then the camp smoke and the smell of fresh venison. It was beautiful. I was with the nightborn at last, and I knew that I was where I belonged. For the first time in my life, it seemed to me I went to bed happy that night, looking out under a corner of the canvas, the stars cut off black by a big shoulder of mountain, and listening to the night noises, and knowing that the same thing would go on next day and forever and ever. For I wasn't going back, and I never did go back. Romance. I got it the next day. We had to cross a big arm of the ocean, 12 or 15 miles at least, and it came on to blow when we were in the middle. That night I was alone on shore with one wolf dog, and I was the only one left alive. Picture it yourself, Threfton broke off to say. The canoe was wrecked and lost, and everybody pounded to death on the rocks except her. She went ashore hanging onto a dog's tail, escaping the rocks and washing up in a tiny breach, the only one in miles. Lucky for me it was the mainland, she said, so I headed right away back, through the woods and over the mountains and straight on anywhere. It seemed I was looking for something and knew I'd find it. I wasn't afraid, I was nightborn, and the big timber couldn't kill me. On the second day I found it. I came upon a small clearing and tumbled down cabin. Nobody had been there for years and years. The roof had fallen in. Fried blankets lay in the bunks and pots and pans were on the stone. That was not the most curious thing. Outside along the edge of the trees, you can't guess what I found. The skeleton of 8 horses, each tied to a tree. They'd starved to death, I reckon, and left only a little pile of bones scattered some here and some there. Each horse had a load on its back. There the loads lay in among the bones, painted canvas sacks, inside moose hide sacks, and inside the moose hand sacks. What do you think? She stopped, reached under a corner of the bed, and among the spruce boughs, and pulled out a leather sack. She untied the mouth and ran out into my hands as pretty a stream of gold as I had ever seen. Coarse gold, placer gold, some large dust, but mostly nuggets. It was so fresh and rough that it scarcely showed signs of water wash. You say you're a mining engineer, she said. And you know this country? Can you name a pay creek that has the colour of that gold? I couldn't. There wasn't a trace of silver, it was almost pure. And I told her so. You bet, she said. I sell that for $19 an ounce. You can't get over 17 for El Dorado gold, and minute gold don't fetch quite 18. And that was what I found among the bones. 8 horse loads of it, 150 pounds to the load. $250,000, I cried out. That's what I reckoned it, roughly, she answered. Talk about romance, and me a slave in the way I had all the years, when as soon as I ventured out, inside 3 days, this was what happened. And what became of the men who mined all that gold? Often and often I wonder about it. They left their horses, loaded and tied, just disappeared off the face of the earth, leaving neither hide nor hair behind them. I never heard tell of them. Nobody knows anything about them. Well, being the night-born, I reckoned I was the rightful heir. Greffram stopped to light a cigar. You know what that girl did? She cashed the gold, saving out £30, which she carried back to the coast. Then she signalled a passing canoe, made her way to Pat Healy's trading post at Dyer, outfitted, and went over Chilcoot Pass. This was in '88, 8 years before the Klondike strike, and the Yukon was howling wilderness. She was afraid of the bucks, but she took 2 young squaws with her, crossed the lakes and went down the river to the early camps on the lower Yukon. She wandered several years over that country, and then on it to where I met her. Liked the looks of it, she said, seeing in her own words, a big bull caribou, knee-deep in purple iris on the valley bottom. She hooked up with the Indians, doctored them, gained their confidence, and gradually took them in charge. She had only left that country once, and then, with a bunch of the young bucks, she went over to Chilcoot, cleaned up her gold cache, and brought it back with her. And here I be, stranger, she concluded her yarn. Here's the most precious thing I own. She pulled out a little pouch of buckskin, worn in her neck with a locket, and opened it. And inside, wrapped in oiled silk, yellowed with age, and worn and thumbed, was the original scrap of newspaper containing the quotation from Thoreau. And are you happy? Satisfied? I asked. With $250,000 you wouldn't have to work down in the States. You must miss a lot. Not much, she answered. I wouldn't swap places with any woman down in the States. These are my people. This is where I belong. There are times, and in her eyes smouldered that hungry yearning I've mentioned. There are times when I wish most awful bad for that Thoreau man to happen along. Why? I asked. So as I could marry him. I do get mighty lonesome at spells. I'm just a woman, a real woman. I've heard tell of the other kind of woman that gallivanted off like me and did queer things. Sort that become soldiers in armies and sailors on ships. Those women are queer themselves. They're more like men than women. They look like men and they don't have ordinary women's needs. They don't want love nor little children in their arms and around their knees. I'm not that sort. I leave it to you, stranger. Do I look like a man? She didn't. She was a woman, a beautiful nut brown woman with a sturdy, health-rounded woman's body, and with wonderful deep blue woman's eyes. Ain't I a woman? She demanded. I am. I'm most all woman, and then some. And the funny thing is, though I'm night-born and everything else, I'm not when it comes to mating. I reckon that kind likes its own best. That's the way it is with me anyway, and has been all these years. You mean to tell me? I began. Never, she said, and her eyes looked to mine with the straightness of truth. I had one husband, only him. Him I called the Ox, and I reckon he's still down in Juneau running the hash joint. Look him up if you ever get back, and you'll find he's rightly named. Look him up I did, 2 years afterwards. He was all she said, solid and stolid, the Ox, shuffling around and waiting on tables. You need a wife to help you, I said. I had one once, was his answer. Widower? Yep, she went loca. She always said the heat of cooking would get her, and it did. Pulled a gun on me one day and ran away with some swashes in a canoe. Caught a blow up the coast and all hands drowned. Thratham devoted himself to his glass and remained silent. But the girl, Miller reminded him. You left your story just as we were getting interested. Tender. Did it? It did, Thratham replied. As she said herself, she was savage in everything except mating. And then she went her own kind. She was very nice about it. She was straight to the point. She wanted to marry me. Stranger, she said. I want you bad. You like this sort of life or you wouldn't be here trying to cross the Rockies in fall weather. It's a likely spot. The fine flew likelier. Why not settle down? I'll make you a good wife. And then it was up to me. And she waited. I don't mind confessing that I was sorely tempted. I was half in love with her as it was. You know, I have never married. I don't mind adding, looking back over my life, that she is the only woman that ever affected me that way. It was too preposterous, the whole thing, and I lied like a gentleman. I told her I was already married. Is your wife waiting for you? She asked. I said yes. And she loves you? I said yes. That was all. She never pressed the point, except once, and then she showed a bit of fire. All I've got to do, she said, is give the word and you don't get away from here. If I give the word, you stay on. I ain't going to give it. I wouldn't want you if you didn't want to be wanted. And you didn't want me. She went ahead and outfitted me and started me on my way. It's a damn strange stranger, she said at parting. I like your looks and I like you. If you ever change your mind, come back. There was one thing I wanted to do, and it was kiss her goodbye. But I didn't know how to go about it, nor how she would take it. I tell you, I was half in love with her, but she settled it herself. Kiss me, she said. Just something to go on and remember. And we kissed, there in the snow in that valley by the Rockies, and I left her standing by that trail and went on after my dogs. I was 6 weeks in crossing over that pass and coming down the first post of the Great Slave Lake. The brawl of the streets came up to us, like a distant surf. A steward, moving noiselessly, brought fresh siphons, and in the silence, Griffin's voice fell like a funeral bell. It would have been better if I had stayed. Look at me. We saw his grizzled moustache, the bulge spot on his head, the puff sacks under his eyes, the sagging cheeks, the heavy dewlap of the general tiredness and staleness and fatness. All the collapse and ruin of a man who had once been strong, who had lived too easily and too well. It's not too late, old man, Barbara said, almost in whisper. By gods, I wish I weren't a coward, was Refren's answering cry. I could go back to her. She's there now. I could shape up and live many a long year with her up there. To remain here is to commit suicide, but I'm an old man, 47, look at me. The trouble is, he lifted his glance and glanced at it, the trouble is that suicide of this sort is so easy. I am soft and tender. The thought of the long day's travel with the dogs appalls me. The thought of the keen frost in the morning of the frozen sled lashings frightens me. Automatically, the glass would cleave towards his lips. With a swift surge of anger, he made as if to crash it down upon the floor. Next came hesitancy, second thought. The glass moved upwards to his lips and paused. He laughed harshly and bitterly. His words were solemn. Well, here's to the Nightborn. She was a wonder. Well, again, we see transformation and becoming. I'm not exactly sure about this story. I think there's something I do like about it, in the fact that it is, how do you say, it is, what am I trying, I'm just trying to put my finger, I know what it is. I remember complaining when I was reading White Fang, that there was this notion of the superior gods, these white men, being so above the eyes, or being so above the Indians in the eyes of the dog, that felt unrealistic to me, unjustified. And I think there's something that is the opposite of that, a recognition of, not superiority, but of difference, or maybe even the superiority, at least parity. It's the same as with the other story that didn't take place in the Yukon. You had that, the House of Pride. You have these folks who are seen as lower, but whom you see through the eyes of the story as higher. I wonder about that. It's an old thing. But you see, I suppose, two divergent choices. The woman who chose to run away and be out in the world, and the fellow who didn't. I guess we don't see what happens to her. For all we know, she's dead somewhere in an harsh winter or some accident of fate. But we do see him. And his fate is painted as pretty terrible, at least in the eyes of it. Though he's comfortable and he's wealthy. In the hands of the devil drink, which we've seen as a negative theme in London before, but comfortable enough if unhappy in the moment. Makes you wonder. I think the idea is that he's painted as him having a bad end, with him making the wrong choice, though in many ways it seems the only choice he can make. But at the same time, for the solemn occasion and the death of the boxer, he seems in happy enough spirits. He's well off, he's in good company, he's reminiscing on these times, he's miserable with himself, but he has the ease. He says himself he's afraid of the life he used to live, the hardship, the frost, the trail. In many ways, the things that would seem to make him better in the eyes of London, the stronger man, the older man, these are things that he abhors, the worst parts of things. And I can agree with that. Hunger and cold and pain and labour. They're things to be embraced and loved. They might make you stronger, but the reason you have to be strong is to avoid or to deal with misery and pain. I think this is a snapshot of a man seeing the world in a negative light when it has been kind to him. I think it's understandable. I think it's very easy to see kindness as, perhaps not kindness, I don't know, maybe I'm not saying this right. It's very easy to see a kind life as a sad life, as a poor life, to miss the power of oneself. But a life in which one does not need power is a life that is blessed. And I suppose also is fragile. Life where one needs no power and one cultivates no power can be taken away from one. It's strange to think on, I suppose. There are two distinct worldviews, which I think are my own and London's, really. I'm envy of good food and easy living. I never saw one of it. And London has the opposite. I saw one of hard living and low food, of a life that makes one tough and hard. I'm not a man, I'm not a dog, so perhaps it's not in such terms, but I wonder if he saw me in parity with other rats, if he'd admire me. I don't know, perhaps. But you cannot eat admiration, you cannot eat well-earned muscle, you cannot eat good and strong living, you cannot eat hardship. And as we've seen across the rest of his vision, the love of life, especially, the struggle of all life is to survive. And when living is easy, living is easy. Hard living makes hard men. It makes a lot of dead men too. Perhaps more than it ever makes hard ones. And in easy living, there are no chances of the vagaries of fate taking your life. For every day of hard living, you roll your dice. I'm getting perhaps a month philosophical here, but then that's what I'm paid for. Paid in cheese, not gold. $19 an ounce, huh? And what was it? 8 horses, £150 load. That's... The fellow in Old Gold Canyon had £250 and reckoned it $250,000. Yeah. No, the fellow here reckoned it $250,000. Maybe both did. Maybe it was different, I don't know. I ain't so good with money. My pay is in cheese. Each one of these I do, I get enough cheese to survive for a day. And for exchanging 5 days worth of cheese, I was able to purchase myself a clock. Though where lamp got it, I've got no clue. Hence why today I'm reading 5 books. Well, I'm reading 5 books, I've got 5 books, but I'm reading more than pushing on myself, even though my throat's starting to give me a bit of grief. Because if I want to rebuild my stores of cheese, in case something happens again, and I can't find any books. That would be my grim ending, my winter, my scarce meat. Well, I won't feel like I'll find more. 3 days stockpile built up, early end. 4 days after this one. I say 4 days because I've not eaten today. I'm not inclined to it after losing so much of my cheese on the clock. So this 5th one will be my ending, and then I'll have my stockpile and eat my cheese. I've read a lot of Jack London, I come to realise. I'm starting to have quite a liking for him. But, you can like a person and not agree with them, I expect. That's the only thing I know. I like Lamp well enough, I don't always agree with him. Not he cares. Funny actually. I suppose I've seen our relationship painted a bit today. I won't say where, if Lamp would have me. It's terrible powerful. While who's watching this, who's listening, you pay attention, I'm sure. See if you can figure out where I've seen it, what relationship I mean. You can tell me if you come to watch. It's a terrible thing to be alone. Right, I'm getting maudlin. I've no wish to be maudlin, so let's be about our business then. One last book. And first, of course, some more. Foolish thing to forget, my throat's giving me grief. There we go. One last book then. And who knows? Maybe I've read enough and I push my throat enough and I starve enough and I'm miserable enough. And life shall reward me and someone shall come in and say something that isn't cheap views on streamboo.com, eh? Maybe I shall be so rewarded. I doubt it. In my experience, the reward for an hard day is just another hard day, so. Moonface. John Claverhouse were a moonface man. You know the kind. Cheekbones wide apart, chin and forehead melting into the cheeks to complete the perfect round. The nose, broad and pudgy, equal distance from the circumference, flattened against the very centre of his face like a dough ball upon a ceiling. Perhaps that is why I hated him. Truly he had become an offence to my eyes, and I believed the earth to be cumbered with his presence. Perhaps my mother may have been superstitious of the moon and looked at her over the wrong shoulder at the wrong time. Be that as it may, I hated John Claverhouse. Not that he had done me what society would consider a wrong or an ill turn. Far from it. The evil were of a deeper, subtler sort, so elusive, so intangible as to defy clear definitive analysis in words. We all experience such things at some periods in our lives. The first time we see a certain individual, one who the very instant before we did not dream existed, and yet, at the first moment of meeting, we say, I do not like that man. Why do we not like him? Now we do not know why. We know only that we do not. We have taken a dislike, that is all. And so I with John Claverhouse. We're all right, had such a man to be happy. Yet we were an optimist. You're always gleeful and laughing. All things are always right. Curse him. What grated on my soul that he should be so happy. Other men could laugh and it did not bother me. I even used to laugh myself before I met John Claverhouse. His laugh, it irritated me, it maddened me. And there's nothing else under the sun could irritate or madden me, it hunted me. Gripped hold of me and would not let go. It was a huge, gargantuan laugh. Waking or sleeping, it was always with me, whirring and jarring across my heartstrings like an enormous rasp. Break of day it came whooping across the fields to spoil my pleasant morning reverie. Under the aching noonday glare where the green things drooped and the birds would droop to the depths of the forest and all nature drowsed, its great ha-ha and oh-ah rose up in the sky and challenged the sun. In the black midnight from the lonely crossroads where he turned from town to his own place came his plaguey cachinations to rouse me from my sleep and make me writhe and clench my nails in my palms. Went forth privily in the night time and turned his cattle into his fields, and in the morning heard his whooping laugh as he drove them out again. It's nothing, he said. The poor dumb beast is enough to be blamed for straying in fat pastures. He had a dog called Mars, a big splendid brute, part deerhound and part bloodhound, and resembling both. Mars were a great delight to him, and they were always together. But I bided my time, and one day, when I was uni all right, lured the animal away and settled for him with some strychnine and beefsteak. It made positively no impression on John Claverhouse. His laugh were hearty and frequent as ever, in his face, much like the full moon it had always been. Then I set fire to his haystacks in his barn. The next morning, being Sunday, he went forth blithe and cheerful. Where are you going? I asked him as he went by the crossroad. Trout, he said, and his face beamed like the full moon. I just don't want trout. Was there ever such an impossible man? His whole harvest had gone up in his haystacks and barn. It was uninsured, I knew. And yet, in the face of famine and the rigour of winter, he went out gaily in quest of a mess of trout, forsooth, because he doted on them. He had gloom but rested no matter how lightly on his brow, or in his bovine countenance grown long and serious and less like the moon. When he removed that smile but once from off his face, I am sure I could have forgiven him for existing. But no, he grew only more cheerful under misfortune. I insulted him. He looked at me in slow and smiling surprise. "I'll fight you? Why?" he asked slowly, and then he laughed. "You are so funny. Oh, you'll be the death of me." Oh. What would you do? It was past endurance. By the blood of Judas, how I hated him. Then with that name, Claverhouse, what a name. Wasn't it absurd? Claverhouse, merciful heavens, what Claverhouse? Again and again I asked myself the question. I should not have minded Smith or Brown or Jones, but Claverhouse, I'll leave it to you. Repeat it to yourself, Claverhouse. Just listen to the ridiculous sound of it. Claverhouse. Should a man live with such a name, I ask you? No, you should say, and no, said I. But I bethought me of his mortgage. What of his crops and barn destroy, I knew he would be unable to meet it. So I got a shrewd, close-mouthed, tight-fisted moneylender to get the mortgage transferred to him. I did not appear, but through this agent I forced a foreclosure in but a few days, no more believe me than the laws allowed, were given John Claverhouse to remove his goods and chattels from the premises. And I strolled down to see how he took it, for he had lived there upwards of 20 years. But he met me with his saucer eyes twinkling, the light glowing and spreading in his face that were full risen at the moon. Ha ha ha, he laughed. The funniest tyke, that youngster of mine. You ever hear the like? Let me tell you, he was down playing by the edge of the river when a piece of the bank caved in and splashed him. "Oh, Papa," he cried, "a great big puddle flew up and hit me." He stopped and walked for me to join him in his infernal glee. "I don't see any laugh in it," I said shortly, and I know my face went sour. He regarded me with wonderment, and then came the damnable light, glowing and spreading as I have described it, till his face shone soft and warm like a summer moon, and then a laugh. "Ha ha, that's funny. You don't see it, huh? Ha ha ha, he doesn't see it. Well, look here, you know a puddle." I turned on my heel and left him. That was the last. I could stand it no longer. The thing must end right there. I thought, curse him. The earth should be quit of him, and I went over the hill. I could hear his monstrous laugh reverberating against the sky. Now I pride myself on doing things neatly, and when I resolved to kill John Claverhouse, I had it in mind to do it in such a fashion that I should not look back upon it and feel ashamed. I hate bungling and I hate brutality. To me there is something repugnant in really striking a man with one's naked fist. Far, it is sickening. So shoot or stab or club John Claverhouse, I had the name. It did not appeal to me. And not only were I impelled to do it, neatly and artistically, but also in such a manner that not the slightest possible suspicion could be directed against me. To this end I bent my intellect, and after weeks of profound incubation I hatched a scheme. Then I set to work. I bought a water spaniel bitch 5 months old and devoted my whole attention to her training. Had anyone spied me early on, they would have remarked that this training consisted entirely of one thing: retrieving. I taught the dog, which I called Bâtard, to fetch sticks. I threw him into the water, and not only to fetch, but to fetch at once, without mouthing or playing with them. The point was that she was to stop for nothing, but deliver the stick in all haste. I made a practice of running away and leaving her to chase me with the stick in her mouth till she caught me. She was a bright animal and took the game with such eagerness that I was soon content. After that, at the first casual opportunity, I presented Bâtard to John Claverhouse. I knew what I was about, for I was aware of a little weakness of his, and a little private sin in which he was regularly and vehemently guilty. "No," he said when I placed the end of a rope in his hand. "No, you don't mean it." His mouth opened wide and he grinned all over his damnable moon face. "I kind of thought somehow you didn't like me," he explained. "Wasn't it funny of me to make such a mistake?" At the thought he bailed his sides with laughter. "What is her name?" he managed to ask between brooks. "Bologna," I said. "What a funny name." I gritted my teeth, for his mirth put the edge on, and snapped that between them. "She was the wife of Mars, you know." Then the light of the full moon began to suffuse his face until it exploded with, "How am my other dog? Well, I guess she's a widow now." "Oh, he whooped after me. I turned and fled swiftly over the hill. Weeks passed by, and on Saturday evening I said to him, "You go away Monday, don't you?" He nodded and his head and grinned. "Do I have another chance to get the mess of those trout? You just don't on." He didn't notice the snare. "Oh, I don't know," he chuckled. "I'm going up tomorrow and try pretty hard." Oscar's assurance made doubly sure, I went back to my house, hugging myself with rapture. Early next morning I saw him go by with a dip net and a gun exactly, and Bologna trotting at his heels. I knew where he was bound, and cut out the back pasture and climbed through the underbrush to the top of the mountain. Keeping through the underbrush to the top, keeping carefully out of sight, I followed the crest along for a couple of miles to a natural amphitheatre in the hills, where the little rivers raced down out of a gorge and stopped for breath in a large and placid rock-bound pool. That was the spot. I sat down on the croak of the mountain, where I could see all that occurred and lighted my pipe. Ere many minutes had passed, John Claverhouse came plodding up the bed of the stream. Balloon were rambling about him, and they were in a high feather, her short snappy barks mingling with his deeper chest notes. Arrived at the pool, he threw down the dip net and sack, drew from the hip pocket what looked like a large fat candle. I knew it to be a stick of giant. Such was his method of catching trout. He dynamited them. He attached the fuse by wrapping the giant tightly in a piece of cotton. Then he ignited the fuse and tossed the explosive into the pool. Like a flash, Bologna was into the pool and after him. I could have shrieked aloud for joy. Claverhouse yelled at her, but without avail. He pelted her with clods and rocks, but she swam steadily on till she got the stick of giant in her mouth, when she whirled about and headed for shore. Then, for the first time, he realised his danger and started to run. As foreseen and planned by me, she made the bank and took out after him. Oh, I tell you, it was great. As I said, that pool lay in a sort of amphitheatre. Above and below, the stream could be crossed on stepping stones, and around, up and down and across the stones raced Claverhouse and Bologna. I could never have believed that such an ungainly man should run so fast. The run he did, Bologna hot-footed after him and gaining. And then, just as she caught up, he in full stride and she leaping with nose at his knee, there was a sudden flash, a burst of smoke, a terrific detonation, and where a man and dog had been the instant before, there were not to be seen but a big hole in the ground. Death from accident while engaged in illegal fishing, that was the verdict of the coroner's jury, and that is why I pride myself in the neat and artistic way in which I finished off John Claverhouse. There were no bungling, no brutality, nothing in which to be ashamed in the old transaction, as I am sure you will agree. No more does his infernal laugh go echoing among the hills, and no more does his fat moon face rise up to vex me. My days are peaceful now, and my nights sleep deep. Well, that's a bit grim. I'm not entirely sure what to say to that. I mean, it's a clever way to kill him, man. You've got to admit that. Your fellow who plots it, clever man, though a very unpleasant seeming sort of fellow. Murder a man out of simple distaste to him. And John Claverhouse seemed quite a nice fellow, but his name is a bit silly. Cheerful. I mean, can't fault him out for being upbeat, even when he's in rough circumstance. It seems somehow a great crime even to kill him for that. An happy man. A man who was living his life and joyful to the world, and who, by no account save the narrator's account, was a misery to others. He had a kid. Good. A rough and wicked deed, but well done. I can't fault him for that. If you're going to do a man like that, it is better to do it cleanly and smart. Still, I don't know there's much of a tale to be told about this one. We see the thing with dogs again, but well, actually that makes me think even worse. When you take the time to train an animal, you take it in, you care for it, and then you spend all that time training it to explode itself. He's a bad man, is that narrator? A clever one, but a bad one. I don't think I have much else to say, really. There's not a lot to it. It's a clever little story. I think, actually, what I will say is it felt very flowy as I was reading it. The words in that is good. Especially the tirade against his name. That felt very natural, very sort of well written and flowy. But the actual meat of the story I don't know much about. It's a bit, it's a bit grim, and that's about it, I think. Anyway, I think that's about it for the day. I don't have any more books to read for you, so I'll be calling it here shortly. I will say that I am probably going to take a slightly more easy day tomorrow. I've been reading a lot the last few days and my throat is a bit rough. I'll go out and look for some books and we'll see what we find, but I'll probably not do anything too strenuous, maybe one or two like these ones. That last one was very short, so not quite that, but maybe one like House of Pride, maybe that felt like a good length. Maybe one like that, or maybe one like that and one like Moonface or something like that, or maybe something a little longer, but nothing too crazy long. Anyhow, anyone who does see this, thank you for hanging around and listening to me. And anyone who doesn't, I don't know why I'm addressing that. Never mind, I'm going to stop there. There's no point addressing you there. Still, I hope you're getting something out of this. And I wish you all a very good evening.